So you might... What is she doing? She's just plummeting to her death. Okay, cool. I was going to say you might hear sounds in the background. The whole, like people like authenticity thing. And I'm like, you know what? I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I'm just authentically speaking a bit too lazy to set my audios differently and stuff like that. So I got people's streams up in the background that I'm listening to as I'm backing up a bunch of stuff and onto an external drive. But I wanted to record this video before doing that because art. Most likely, if you've clicked on this video, art. Right. I just want to see what happens if she lands or not. I'm sorry. So a bit of a long intro as I explain. Okay, yeah, they're fine, I think. Anyways, so I wanted to talk about art because I just went and did a project that took time, as art does. And I want to kind of go through each of the parts of it that I did and talk about like the long journey I've had with art, its importance to this channel, its importance to me. We even talk about cursive a little bit because cursive was talked about earlier in this chat, and it kind of reminded me of something art related that I want to talk about. So this is like a nice long intro. Okay, they've landed. And also I was waiting for Photoshop to load. And again, I could just, edit this, and cut that down, but let's just be as raw as possible. I want to give this to you raw. Okay? So that's what we're doing. So for the introduction of this video, to keep it somewhat, real and down to earth and stuff like that, I kind of want to just kind of lay out what this video is going to be, because I'm going to title it something like I'm bad at art, let's yap about it, or something like that. But because I want to talk about the journey as I'm going through it. And I kind of like the idea, like when PewDiePie did his like 100-day situation and stuff like that, kind of like also documenting it. And so I kind of want to document mine, because who knows what will be months from now, years from now. Maybe I'll actually like see significant improvement when you line it up as I make stuff like this throughout, and obviously because art's important to this channel. A lot of things that I've done, a lot of things that have been drawn, I've had to do myself, because in a lot of cases, that's all I've had to do stuff. Nowadays, I got people I could rely on, but they also like undersell themselves. I've had the conversation and comment many times on this channel where a lot of them are like, oh yeah, I'll just charge you like maybe like 100, and they'll do like a full entire thing background and stuff. I'm like, you really should charge me more for this. I'm just saying. So they landed just fine, but their jet is upside down and it's twerking. It's slowly out of frame. Okay. Also, it's funny that this, and the reason I'm even putting this in and leaving this in is because, funny enough, we'll see later in a further chapter, but this specifically would be very useful before this project. And I want to talk about that too. So I want to leave this in, so I'm editing it, I'll be able to remember, oh, hey, we need to talk about references, and that I'm going to be using her stream, not a lot, but like as the starting for the talking point of it. Now they're beefing with the sky because they just shot bullets. I'm distracted, if you couldn't tell. But it's also because I didn't really plan this properly. I don't have proper talking points because I kind of want to just talk about how I feel. And right now, how I feel is kind of tired. But, okay, now they're fighting their sleep paralysis demons. Or upside down star scream in the distance. That's a jet. I'm pretty sure that's her jet. She was flying it, and then I tabbed over to set stuff up, tabbed back, and it looks like that. So it'd be like that sometimes. This is going to be important later. What's interesting to me is when I look at art. Art is actually probably my real hobby. I love YouTube. I love editing videos. I love making videos. I love planning videos. I love shooting videos. And so in a way, that's a hobby too. And, once I actually get a decent job and stuff like that, I'll still do it constantly when I have the time, because I like doing YouTube and stuff. But if I think about a hobby where it's not about making any kind of content creation or anything, it's definitely art. So the introduction of this video is actually just going to be like a brief history of me and art before I then get into this recent art project that took me about a month. And I like the idea of documenting it because, like ever since PewDiePie did like the 100 days thing, a lot of people they feel one way or the other, but the idea of documenting your journey is one that kind of universally was like, that's a cool idea though. Some people might have differences of opinion of, oh, well, he can take 100 days to do that because he's kind of like basically in retirement at this point as a YouTuber. He can have days free to do that. And also he's a father though, so being a parent also takes time, especially of like a newborn or just even a toddler. So, that's a bit of a debate I'm not going to get into, but I guess I could put his face in the thumbnail now because I talked about him just enough, you know what I mean? But on a more serious note, different people have different time. So 100 days might not be enough for some people, and it might be more than enough for some other people. And so what I want to start this video off introduction wise is one of the things you're going to have to learn, whatever your art journey is or where you are with art in your life right now, is it's going to be different. Obviously in the creative space, a lot of times we like to compare ourselves just because it could be a nice measuring bar, right? Like if we're learning a new skill and we see someone that can already do that skill, we might like comparing ourselves specifically to see if we're making any progress or not, more so than if we can copy somebody specifically. It happens with YouTube too, where it's like, okay, this person's up their editing game. Can I, start being creative and up my editing game, etc., etc. So in relation to art specifically, I've been drawing like forever. I've been drawing since I was a child. I love drawing. I've loved drawing forever. But I feel like I definitely peaked in the 2010s. In the 2010s, where I got my first commissions even and stuff like that, I definitely was not able to get over a hurdle. And so I felt like, okay, this is as good as it gets for now. So what does it have to do with this, for example, this project that we're going to go over and stuff like that? So now let's get into chapter 1. Actually, chapter like 0.5 first. Tail end of the intro is I'm a part of this group called Mechanyx for all your art and design needs, if you will. A group of creatives. A lot of us do many different things in the creative space: 3D modeling, 2D modeling, art, video editing, SEO stuff. There's a lot of stuff we encompass. But in it, we have captains and then we have vices, like vice captain stuff. On a Steam server, Steam Shell Kid is like the current Hokage, if you will, the Mechanyx. He's not necessarily going to like that I said that, and I apologize then if he's watching this, but what I mean is like it was kind of like his brainchild. You know what I mean, though. So wherever the transitioning period is now, where there is 7 head captains after all, so it is kind of more like a Power Ranger team, if you will. That's kind of where we're starting, though, is with Steam. So now we're getting to chapter 1 proper, where because of that, he was the first one I was going to draw, because I was going to draw all 7 of the captains and all 5 of the vices. I'm one of the vices, as a matter of fact. So for this project with Steam, so if I open the Steam folder over here on the side, there's a lot that went into this, and I'll hide the layers here. So actually, if I just go down the list and hide the layers, one of the things I don't tend to do this in draw piles, but what I will tend to do is what I call like a frame. Some sort of like just kind of a rough sketch of what positioning I kind of want things to be in, so that way I can get a better idea when I start drawing the actual drawing on top of it. So I think that's this layer. Yeah, so I can get a rough idea of like, okay, this is where the shoulders are supposed to be. We can zoom in, actually. We probably should zoom in, as a matter of fact. So, with the wire frame underneath, if you will, a kind of idea of like, okay, where the knees are, the hips, elbows, stuff like that. Something that I haven't been the best at mapping out. I've done it for a while, but I'm not the best at proportions, is what I mean. And we'll get into that, because then we get to the drawing aspect of it, where then I kind of didn't figure out how I want to draw it out, and like it's like, okay, well, with Steam's character, so Shell and stuff, right? We got the helmet, a lot of the important stuff. I gave him a captain's jacket, kind of relation to the information I mentioned earlier about them kind of being like, in some cases, still considered the leader of Mechanyx, even though he's basically has it amongst 7 people at this point, right? And originally, and we'll get into this later too, I was going to give all of the captains a captain jacket, but then I realized one of the things in this challenge that I really wanted to do was do full body drawings, and I didn't want to make an excuse of why I didn't, like, say, have to draw arms, because the captain's jacket was covering the arms, so I only had to maybe do a torso or somebody as we get into other people. So with Steam's, I was like, he can have one, though, because I've drawn Steam's character several times now, so he can have one, because that'd be kind of cool, maybe even kind of a new thing to do. But for everyone else, I'm like, not unless their character already has a jacket, fine. And maybe I'll do like a captain's jacket, like foil, like if it's like a trading card system, a reflective rainbow colored, version of each people, of all 7 of the captains, where they do get a cool jacket. But for Steams, that's why he got his. And then also I envisioned, when I initially envisioned this for the pose and stuff, why the foot's like that, is I kind of envisioned it where all of them are posted up like on a ledge, like you're looking up at them. So the reason he's posed like this is because he's supposed to be up above you at least a little bit, and like you're looking up at him on top of something, maybe in the front even of like the others. So that's why I kind of went like that. But then if we move into the coloring, so the way the coloring worked with this one was pretty simplistic because he doesn't have a lot of colors going on. So that was the nice part. The yellowish goldish color, a lot of the blacks differentiating it from the like the overalls and then the dress shirt underneath, and then of course the difference between that and like the face and stuff too. So that part was fun. One of the challenges I wanted to do with this one too was I wanted to experiment with film grain. I've used it for Final Fantasy thumbnails to varied success. And I was like, okay, let's try it. But first, we had to get the rest of the shading in, because this is what I mean by peaking in the previous. A lot of my shading and how I would describe it is a Sonic Adventure 2 poster shading. See, growing up, like my favorite game of all time, if you don't know me and you're new, is Sonic Adventure 2. I play it. I play it a bunch even recently. We 100% it again even. So, you know, it's not even nostalgia. I just really like that game. I don't know what it is, but it just never fails me. So I guess it's like a comfort game, but it's a comfort game that we've 100%ed. So it's not even like, ah, crap, the digging levels. I love those levels, so whatever. But my point is, when you got that game, there was a perfect guide me and my brother got growing up. And the perfect guide came with a poster. So when I would look at the poster, what they would do with a lot of the coloring is they'd have like the main color, then they'd have like a dark color actually kind of underneath, kind of shading it, and then you use like a light, like thin light color on top of that. I didn't really do that here too much because I'm trying to deviate away from that a little bit and trying to figure out like what's my style. My style at this point is if it's complete and it looks kind of decent enough, then we kind of rock with it. But that's why then as I start enabling some of these other layers and we get the whole thing back, you know, I kind of put a little bit of a light on the captain's jacket because I was going to imagine the light coming from the top down. We got the head hexes, so on the helmet is like this, the hexagon design. And then the lights. I usually like to illuminate the lights, at least on the helmet, because in VR chat, when he talks, they'll usually light up while he's talking, and I thought it was pretty cool. So that's the most for the Steam drawing. And so one of the things that I kind of thought was kind of cool was I accidentally did this once when I was turning off layers, is I turned that off, and I turned that off, and that looked really cool to me for some reason. Like the lighting of it looked really cool. Like the idea of all the coloring gone. Like just looking at the shading and stuff like that too, looked really cool. And I utilized that at some point later on, when I did the final project, which we'll get into. But for the Steam one, overall, I did like how it came out. And I think part of it was comfort though, because like I said, I've drawn Steam's character a couple times, so this part of the journey was most arguably the easiest. Not saying Steam's character is just easy. He has cool design stuff going on that we could talk about, like the gear over here, the things on the arms I didn't realize before. There's a lot of actually cool stuff that goes into his character. It's pretty stylish, to be fair. But what I mean is, his character is the one out of all 12 of these characters that I've probably drawn the most, even over mine. So this one was one that I could complete and color and stuff, and then use the film grain to see how I felt about that within that single day, because I've done it before. Not this specific pose and not a full body version, but nonetheless. So this one was one of the easier ones, if not the easiest one. Maybe not the easiest one. We'll get to that. But it was one of the easier ones for me to draw. It's one of the worst feelings in the world when you're like 16 minutes into a video and you're like, did I hit record? I don't think so. So next up, we have Melody. So first we have Quill. So that's why one layer is called Melody Tranquil, like her full thing on certain platforms, and then one's just called Melody. We'll get to that. The first one was this one. Now I saw Steam draw this a couple streams ago, like in like near the beginning of June, and so I thought Melody's character underwent a redesign, and so I thought, okay, cool, I'll draw that. And then I saw this on Juno when she streams and Melody's in Call, this kind of design as well. So I'm like, okay, that's the new thing on the block. Okay, I can rock with that. This is some of the old shading, and I got to bring that up again because the shading is going to change actually as we go on. But I also, despite the simplicity of the design, I don't actually like how this turned out. And it's mainly because of the legs. I could not figure out how to make this look correct. I feel I couldn't make the legs look correct, I feel, too. I did the same thing. Like, if I open this folder, it's the same with all of them, right? Like, I got the wireframe. This one even has, like, the coloring underneath. I actually did this thing that you see sometimes people do, where they'll color it underneath with, like, a dark color and then color on top of that. But if I just hide all that, we did have the wireframe first as well. And I kind of expanded on it as we went. And I wanted to make sure, another thing I wanted to do was make sure that another part of the challenge, if you will, was to not have everyone just standing like a front-on position, like front view, arms to the side. I'm not knocking that, by the way. I'm not knocking when other people do that, by the way. I'm not saying I'm never going to do it again. But part of this challenge was, okay, 12 people, let's practice 12 different poses. Let's practice 12 different maybe arm positions or leg positions or head positions to the side a little bit even, or up or down kind of. Let's practice these things that I normally don't go for. A, because I kind of don't need to, but B, because I don't really ever have an excuse to practice them, and so I wanted to kind of force myself to do that with this one. So with this one, you know, it's okay. It's okay, given that I didn't really have I had like one reference I could use for this one, and it was one of Steam's drawings, and it's okay, but like the top half is definitely a lot longer than the bottom half, which is part of my problem with the bottom half. But the shading changes. So if we go to then this next melody, this is when, so technically, spoiler alert, Kimple's in here, all right? And by Kimple is when I started experimenting with this new kind of shading, and so then I went back and I did that for previous characters. I still don't like how I did this either, though, if I'm being completely honest. Something just about doing the lower half of Melody's character just does not look correct. I didn't actually really know what the lower half looked like. I assumed it's like the symphonic character that they've done before, and even then I kind of botched it. So, you know, I'm not particularly proud of it, but I am proud of the shading that I started employing on Kimple. I went back to the older ones and started doing it. So this kind of idea, I don't know, this kind of like a hazy kind of like glow almost. I don't know the proper term. I know a term I'm not going to say. Steam knows what I almost just said. The word glow might have just did it. But there's a level of that I am proud of, though. However, I am proud of figuring out, like, if I want to do this more in the future, there's some things to clean up. It's not, you know, the most beautiful of things, but I can do that and feel like, oh, hey, maybe I kind of like how this looks a bit better. So by the time I got to chapter 2 here of Melody's character, I did kind of like that I did decide to try that idea. Chapter 3 would be Senko's character. Now, this one's a bit rough for a couple of reasons. Again, the thing I went off of was when Steam did his Inktober for 2024, there was a part where he comes across Senko's character when he's trying to, like, leave the city, and so he has to, like, go up the wall with spiked boots and stuff. So you kind of briefly see, like, certain angles, but not a lot. So I was like, cool. One of the challenges I'll do then is just figure out what exactly are we even doing. But secondly, after that, I was like, cool, this will be a little bit of a freestyle situation then, right? So here was the wireframe that I keep calling it. And one of the things that I liked too was actually adding the idea of someone holding something. So the challenge for Senko in chapter 3 here was, okay, the first two characters weren't really holding anything. It was kind of just them. Senko's character, much like in that Inktober drawing, what if we had him holding like some sort of weapon of some sort? So let me just kind of briefly get an idea of how that would look. And then proportions, because proportions is something that I historically have been pretty flawed in, right? Like if this is the hips and this is the knees, this should not be the feet already. That's a really small distance from it. And I did actually have to expand how big I ended up making Senko. Senko was not long enough. Like the feet were originally up here, and then I had to go back, erase everything, extend it. And it's a constant problem that I've actually had when drawing full body stuff. And by full body, I mean, like, you know, I guess like full, you know, head to toe situations. So it's something that I learned by chapter 3 here. And I was like, okay, cool. That needs to change. Let's make sure we work on it. So something you'll see me implement, and I'll talk about it more, is instead of this being the feet, what I would do is like hip, knee, ankle, you know, and then maybe feet would be somewhere down here. So that was one of the things. And then as we bring the stuff back in and all the different layers on the side here, one of the things that's kind of neat is, where's the rest of the color? I must have missed a layer. Yeah, there it is one of the things I did do was there was a character drawing of, I thought it's either them as a robot or they have like a helmet that's like a fox robot helmet. So I use all the colorings from that card. Steam will know that. For the colors for this, the arm's a bit. I mean, like, you got to have some big guns to hold a big gun. So it's not like it's the worst thing ever. But this is not like right here. This is not the prettiest situation. You know, not the worst, but not the best. But I could, again, originally the new shading wasn't on here, so I went back and did some of that, and I did kind of like how that looks. But then there's other things that I still definitely got to work on, like they had like a tail, for example. Doing the tail behind them, it's like, it's base color, a lighter color over here, a darker color over here. It's good enough, to get the idea across. And that's one of the great things about battling perfectionism is you kind of want to work on making sure that sometimes if you're conveying what you're trying to convey, then that is fine. That is perfection in a way. Maybe not perfection necessarily, but it's good enough. And when you're battling perfectionism, you usually never think of anything as good enough. One thing too is eyes. So eyes, as we go on from here on in, some people have like straight up eyes, right? Steam's eyes are kind of like glowing, like Batman slits, and same with Melody's for that reason. But like Senko has eyes. So I started experimenting with eyes a little bit too, where I'd go like, okay, light color, dark color on the top half, kind of a bit like of this like shine thing. And then sometimes what I would do is I'd lower the opacity and kind of put like another one on top to make it a little bit kind of look reflective. I don't necessarily love how it turned out, but I do love that I tried it so I can be like, okay, this is how it turned out when I did it this time. And in the future, I can go off of this now to try and maybe make it better. Because one of the sayings when it comes to doing art, but really anything that you might hear is focus on making it first, then make it perfect afterwards. If you really want to make it better, fine, go ahead. But focus on making the thing exist first, so that way you can have something to then try to make look perfect later. And maybe that perfection comes months down the road. Like maybe you draw something and then, spoiler alert, you're allowed to revisit it and redraw it, say in like 6 months when maybe you've learned a couple more new things. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to start doing this with eyes. And so in chapter 3, quote unquote Senko, I wanted to start doing stuff like that for that reason. And I'm like, I kind of like how it turned out. I'm not necessarily in love with any of these necessarily. I think, if I try to redo these in June of 2026, we'll see actually if it is actually any better or not. But for getting them to exist so I can actually get the project done, and that kind of regards to what I just said, I do like that I did do something. So then I now have something actually here to work off of. And so that's chapter 3, Senko. Chapter 4, I believe, is in fact Juno. So speaking of, if I hide all the layers again, and we get just the wireframe back up. That was one of the main things about all of these, is making sure to have a wireframe, or just whatever the frame, whatever it's supposed to be called, making sure to have it. I would start expanding. So unlike the first one, by chapter 4 here, we would have, like, I make sure to do a circle for the neck. I'd make sure to kind of divvy up the torso, so there'd be like the top part of the torso, the middle part where the navel and stuff is, and then the hips. So that'd be like 3 different circles between that point. And so as we bring it back in, that kind of looks cool. Accidentally, that kind of looks like almost like a vector. Vectors I think are like all one color usually, but that I accidentally found something I kind of like. So hang on a second. But anyways, as we slowly bring this back in, because I don't tend to use like hundreds of layers per character, but I do use a couple different ones. So that way, if I do something and it's completely not the greatest, like when I was doing the hexagons on the pants, if I would have got to the bottom and not, like, just truly hated them, it wouldn't have been something that I would have to then either erase or delete. That would have taken the rest of the pants with them. So there's that. But with this one, I wanted to, like mentioning before, poses, right? So Senko was holding something. Steam was kind of like the crouch forward, arm up on the knee. Melody, I was just trying to make them exist and live their best life. So with Juno, what I decided to do was arms crossed. So I'm not good at drawing arms crossed for various reasons. But this is okay. But also, like we mentioned previously, focus on making it exist first. Then you can focus on making it perfect later. The thing about Juno's character, I did draw them once in October of 2024, October, November. Seal was actually streaming, and I was like, cool, name somebody that we know. And then whoever they would have named, I would have drawn them. So I did do a drawing, no references, which is, it kind of shows. I drew them sitting on top of it's an airship in the sky at night. And it's okay. But this one, I decided, obviously, to maybe look some stuff a bit more. And by now, also with like VR chat and stuff and world hopping with people, there's some people I've seen now a bit more often in like VR chat. So that made it a little bit easier. But that was the main goal of this one. It was a from the front view, you know, if you go by that, but the arms were crossed. Figuring out why, like where the thumb would be, where the fingers would be, where the markings on the jacket to kind of show where the fingers are kind of pressing into it. It kind of looks like cracks more than creases, so I'd have to work on that in the future if I ever redo this one, you know, as we go down the road again. That would be something I would revisit, is like creasing stuff more than just cracking stuff. But that's kind of what I wanted to do for this. That was like the main objective, was this right here, and making sure it looked like the arms were crossed, because there was at one point I was going to not do it. At one point I was going to hide more of the hands with the forearms here. And I was like, no, that's not what we're challenging ourselves to do. So we can't do that. Also, Juno has a bit unique eyes. So her eyes are like the power button symbol. So there's the undercoloring, sure, but then you have that on top, which is really cool. One thing I probably should have changed is the color I use for these lines. These lines probably should be darker. I wanted to match the same color as like the shading that I was doing for the darker part of the skin, so I used that. But I feel like while on the belly here, it's kind of okay. On the face, it kind of doesn't. It looks more like a blush, I think, than the line it's supposed to be. So maybe I just need to change the one on the face. We'll see. But for the most part, I do kind of like how this one came out, because of stuff like this too, where I kind of like how the hexagons came out. I don't know if I want them on top of the shading. So in the future, I might shade on top instead of shading under. But I do like how it came out. I do like, and that's one of the cool things about the Mechanyx members, in my opinion, too. A lot of people's characters just look cool, whether they're influenced from something or literally just a brainchild from scratch. I just think there's like a lot of diversity in terms of like what people's characters look like and do and how they function and stuff. And so it's kind of, I couldn't cheat this challenge by carbon copying if I wanted to. It was going to force me to not only try and think of, you know, specific challenges per character, but also just the differences in the characters. And also, like I said, doing full body, which is something that I don't tend to usually do. It's usually because I don't have to, right? If I'm doing a thumbnail, usually that's supposed to be like a close on the, even if you're using a cartoon character, it's usually like a close up on the face of a character doing an expression or something. So maybe like at most from like the collarbone up is something you would look at me doing. But you know, with these ones, like, no, I wanted full entire things for a very specific reason. But then I can also reuse these in the futures because I make them PNGs. So that was cool. So that was what, chapter 4? All right, so chapter 5. Chapter 5, we get to Kimple. Now, the thing about Kimple, it was another lesson in wireframe because, again, I had to make her legs longer after a while because it just was not looking correct. Ooh, yeah, taking away the line. Because, like, maybe I haven't really been pointing it out, but on the side here, there's like the wireframe layer, there's like a coloring layer, and there's like the shading layer, and then there's usually like the drawn layer. So wireframe, then this drawed layer, color it, shade it. It's usually like 4 layers, maybe some extra layers if I want to do some extra stuff. With Kimple's, the quote-unquote challenge, if you will, was when we had the conversation about the Mechanyx and the 7 captains and the 5 vices. It was several videos ago, but the idea was, Steam mentioned, you know, One Piece was the initial inspiration for the Armory, which was, and well, it still is actually, Steam's Discord server. It was originally called the Airship. It's now called the Armory, but the original inspiration was One Piece. So I clocked that basically as what started the conversation back in like April. Was I noticed that there's like 7 warlords in One Piece, there's 7 captains in Mechanyx, there's 5 vices or vice admirals needed to do a buster call in One Piece, and we have 5 vices in Mechanyx. So, you know, I started, you know, doing like that. I don't know who the 4 emperors are, as a matter of fact. Steam, if you're watching, you can answer that probably. But one thing that I wanted to do then for Kimple, her specific quote-unquote challenge, was not just shading. I decided that afterwards. Initially, what I wanted to do was draw her as similar to Boa Hancock as possible, because in that conversation, I was like, okay, then who, which captain is which warlord? And Boa, this team was like, Boa, Kimple's definitely Boa. So it was like, cool. So this one is how it initially looked. The shading, that's when the shading started, and I wanted to take the shading off, because usually what I'll do is I'll use a pretty, not a light color always, but I purposely used a darker purple on the initial layer. I used a darker color for all of these, because the difference with the shading, and this is where the shading challenge comes in, so it's like a Boa Hancock / shading challenge, is what I would usually do is the purple, a lot of the body parts that are purple would have been this. I probably would have aligned it with something like this, maybe. But I wanted to do something different. So what I did is I made a lot of stuff dark, and then I would use what I would usually use for the highlight color or for the base color as a highlight color, and then do another highlight color, and maybe do another highlight color, and then still do darker colors where, there would be shadows. So that was kind of the change that I did, the shift, if you will, for chapter 5 here, Kimple, because if we go back to, or my bad, Kim Kittybot, as a matter of fact, if we go back one chapter, right, and we go back to Juno, and we go back to the midriff here, right? So usually what I would do when coloring skin is I would use a light color, and then I use like a dark color on the edges or something like this, or if I wanted to line, or like the belly button even. That was kind of my, especially when it comes to skin, because I'm not really good, well, I'm not really good at art, period, but shading skin is definitely where I'm weaker at than shading clothes. I'm not necessarily saying I'm the greatest at shading clothes, but if you had to, ask me which one I'm better at, I'm better at shading clothes and I'm better at shading skin. So with this one, I wanted to try something different for that reason, because I can't keep saying, oh, I don't like how this looks, and then just keep doing it. On one hand, I guess I can, right? Because on one hand, you can kind of look at something and go, well, as I get better at the base thing, maybe this other thing that I don't like will start to look better next to it. As the foundation improves, maybe the building will look better after all. So that was my thought process, but I'm like, no, let's actually just change, So, even though the ears are up there, I put the earrings down here anyways. These aren't hanging off of the hair. These are earrings, and they're shaped like the Kimple Cat Breb, but gold, because Kimple did have, at one point, her joints on her model were golden. So I went like that. This was originally also going to be like a Cat Breb tail, but I thought I was starting to use too many colors at that point, so I just kept it gold and like the rest of stuff. So the outfit's definitely inspired by Boa Hancock as well. I also really like how the mouth came out. It's kind of like a little cat smile kind of a situation going on. But I liked it. This was the first one that took me the longest, because the first 4 I did 1 per day, and then Kimple tripped me up a bit. So in this 30-day-ish challenge that I gave myself, I started it June 6th, which was, for context, for those that were, like Mechanyx and stuff, when me, Melody, Juno, and Steam played the Left 4 Dead Nightmare mod. That's around when this challenge started. And so it ended, when this video dropped having this in it, was in fact when, July 6th, so 30 days later. So for context about why that might be in the title, or I might reference that more often. But for this challenge, I liked it once I extended the legs. The legs used to end like way up here, and I just kept being like, no, they got to keep going lower and lower until we finally got them low enough. I'm like, that's more like, because I think what confused me is the hips are really kind of covered up by this. So figuring out the hip to start of the leg to the knee difference, I think that's probably what was kind of throwing me off of why I couldn't quite figure that out. But I did love the shade. Well, I'm not like this is the greatest shading ever, but I do like that I tried something different by this point, and I do kind of like how it turned out, that I started using it then for the rest of the challenge. So as we go into chapter 6, one's Sarah Cross. Y'all at the Overwatch tournament, y'all remember Sarah. So there's a general consensus amongst Mechanyx, especially the people that do any kind of art amongst Mechanyx whatsoever, that Sarah's character is universally the hardest character to draw. There's a lot going on, and not in a bad way. Just in case Sarah's hearing this for some reason, we don't mean it in a bad way. It's cool. It's cool. There's no real character quite like theirs. Okay, but it does mean when you're someone like me who can't draw, let alone the others who can draw, it can be an adventure figuring out how certain stuff should look, how it kind of works in our own styles and stuff like that. So the quote unquote chapter 6, the Sarah challenge here, if you will, was actually kind of just making sure I could complete it. With the wire frame up. So the influence though for the pose for this one is actually Sarah's own reference sheet. She has a reference sheet. And what I want to do is like, okay, I'll do one based off of that, but I'll swap the arm positions. So the other arm in her reference sheet, the right arm's on the hip and the left arm's the one that's up. Well, that claw is kind of big, and I didn't want to use that as an excuse to cover stuff up. So like kind of like the jackets that I didn't do, I'm like, we'll swap that. I'll do the same pose, but we'll swap the arms. That way the claw isn't covering up too much, and I have to draw the other arm. I can't be like, nah, we're not doing that. So as we bring stuff back, and as we bring like the skin back, and then well, this is actually something I wanted to highlight real quick. This is what I started kind of doing, is figuring out how I wanted to do the skin. So in some cases I did this dark color actually as the skin, and then this kind of lighter peach color, I don't know, maybe a little colorblind might be going in here. I colored that on top of this. So this isn't actually what was shaded. This was the base color, was this dark color, and then I would go back and kind of like use the regular skin tone to highlight stuff, and then I'd maybe put an extra highlight color on top of that, is how I would do that. So as we bring back in the rest, so this one had a bit more layers because of that, because there's a bit more skin to deal with. But that's also why this kind of looks like this, is because I'm like, okay, for the challenge for this one, this is kind of like pen ultimate, I believe, is usually what's used in like movies and acts and stuff as like the setup and the scene or the act before the final act. This was kind of a little bit like a pseudo penultimate part of the challenge, because first of all, of the 12 people, this is chapter 6, right? This is the sixth person. But also, if I could get to a point where I drew Sarah's character here in a way that I felt was passable, because again, it's like full body too, so I can't be like, oh, let's draw from like thighs up. No, it had to be all or nothing, right? And if I could pull that off and then draw something and color something that I actually liked, I felt like I could then confidently finish off the other 6 in a similar fashion. Where if this was going to be the most complicated one, but fun, there's a lot of fun stuff going on here, to be honest. But if I could do that, then I could do the rest. Like the challenge basically was doable. It's kind of like if you're doing a game challenge or an art challenge or a food challenge, whatever. It's that one part where you go, oh, if I can do this step, we can do this completely. I don't know the proper term for that, if there's a proper art term for that either, but it's basically that feeling when you're like, oh, if I didn't think I could do this, this is the skill check, and if I can pass this skill check, we are able to clear this. Like, we can do this. In track, because I did a lot of running. I did a lot of cross country and track and field and stuff like that too. There was this one part that we would do called, or this one run that had this thing called Heartbreak Hill. And it was a good 3-4 miles into the run. So in kilometers, because I know a 5K is about 3.3 miles. So I'm actually, I might be a little wrong. Might have been like a 4K into it, because it was like at least 2.5 miles into the run. Point is, if this hill is pretty steep, and this was called Heartbreak Hill because people are like, I don't want to run, or don't want to walk, I don't want to walk, I don't want to walk, and this would either break you and you would walk eventually, or if you ran to the top of it, you would feel so good that you're like, I can finish the rest of this race, because that was the hardest part of the race. Because it wasn't in cross country, it's usually point to point instead of laps. So you just had to do that once and you were good. So I bring that up to say, this was kind of like that, but in art form, where I'm like, if I can do this, we can do all of it. And I feel like while there are things that I can improve on when it comes to her character, not just because of the complexity, but also just because, there's some shading that kind of fell off in some parts that I probably could go back and maybe challenge myself to do. I think maybe like the hip could have been out a bit more, or it could have been one way or the other instead of just kind of static and straightforward with the hand on it, I could have did that. And then this is the big one. These claws should be a bit more over the fingers. So these should be at least, even if they stay here, these should be over to the left a bit more, and or the hand should have been over to the right a bit more. One of those things should have been the difference maker. So there's like a couple things with each of these I could definitely point out. As we get into this next 6, there are a bunch of things I could point out. But part of this challenge and part of the point is, again, focus on making it exist, and then you can make it perfect afterwards. And so at this point in the challenge, right, I did the first 4 in 4 days. Kimple took me several days to do. And so by the time I revisit Sarah, I was able to do this in a day. But it was the entire day. It was like wake up, get breakfast, get the tablet going, and then work on this all the way until we went to sleep, with obviously breaks for like eating and of course showering, because we stay hygienic around here, so stuff like that. But that kind of became what started happening with here, because this is the one I was fearing the most. But it's not a knock against Sarah, by the way, and it's a fun character. So that was chapter 6. Chapter 7. I needed chapter 7. Chapter 7 is creature. So with the completion of Sarah, we have 6 of the 7 captains done. Now the 7th captain, spoiler, Etsuko, which is why I brought up earlier, you might hear their stream going in the background. We got some things to talk about when we get to chapter You thought I was fumbling my words. I just wanted to beatbox. Sometimes that just happens. Sometimes beatboxing is fun. When we get to chapter Etsuko, there she is. Sorry, it's just like, it was like, nah, you weren't beatboxing, you messed that up. It's like, yeah, okay, fine, caught me. that's what that looked like to me. But anyways, chapter 7, creature AFK, right? So I brought up Etsuko because they're the 7th captain, right? But I just had a huge case of art block trying to figure out what to do for them. I'll explain more when we get there. So then I was like, okay, instead of spending like a week of this month, maybe just in art block, purgatory, not knowing what to do, I do know what I want to do for some of the vices. So let's just jump to the vices, and I'll just push Etsuko down the road, like metaphorically, by the way, not because of bully allegations. Metaphorically, we'll just like kick that can down the road and get back to it when I know, at least for some of the vices, exactly what I want to do. For some of them, let's jump into that. Let's explore that. I like that for me. So creature was the first of the vices that I did. And so for creature, I knew exactly kind of what I wanted to do, because when I drew Steam's pose, I already had creatures in mind as well. I kind of had the both of them envisioned. So one of the things I wanted to do here was hands. Again, I didn't want to do straightforward pose. Again, I'm not knocking that, but I wanted to challenge myself to not do that. So of course with the wireframe, and we kind of then, I liked, or what I needed this particular chapter for though, was I absolutely love the simplicity of Creature's character. And so one of the things I did too was to just put hands in pockets. I don't even think the hoodie that he wears has pockets on the front, but I did it anyways because the focus was going to be more on the vest and stuff anyways. And then the head, right? The way this works is you kind of use white actually to frame his character's head when it's under the hood. And even the eyes and stuff too, and the neck and the whatnot. So this was going to be more of the fun part anyways. So the hands I didn't necessarily have to have, out. And if anything, I did need some practice drawing hands in stuff, because I feel like on one hand, it's an easy way to hide if you can't draw hands, but that doesn't mean you're necessarily perfect at drawing hands in pockets. You would think it would be the easier one of the two to do, and you'd be right. I'm not saying that's, necessarily harder for anybody to draw, basically not draw hands versus drawing hands, but you'd be surprised. When I first drew these, I kind of actually didn't like how they looked. I'm like, that's not how hands look when they're sitting in pockets. Even if you're doing the thing where you're only you're like hanging your hands by your thumbs in a pocket, there's like a certain look to that, and I wasn't hitting it at first. But the biggest challenge for me was actually the headphones. So Creature does wear headphones, and even now looking at it, I'm not necessarily in love with how this looks. Not the shading. The shading is something I applied again, where I did the dark color, and then like the base color I actually used as a highlight color. That I kind of grew to love as I would do more of these. But the headphones, they sit on the head the way they would, but I don't know, because I did the wireframe and I did the headphones on the wireframe at one point, and that's what I mapped, and it definitely could use improvement. But I think that's one thing that's okay to keep saying, because it's okay to go like, yeah, I like it. I do like it. But I could do better, and I will do better eventually. I think that's okay. There's Obviously, one of the things about perfectionism is some people also combat and they battle complacency. They never want to be complacent. It is okay to acknowledge where you are in a journey, though. It is okay to go, hey, this is maybe my ability right now. That's not necessarily complacency. Because obviously you still want to do better, but that doesn't mean you have to belittle what you've accomplished so far. You know, a staircase, right? You're not going to leap the whole staircase in one bound, most likely. You're going to have to take steps. It's okay to go, oh, hey, we're on step 7, you know? My knees aren't that bad. Without having to also think that it means you're saying, I only ever want to make it to step 7. They don't have to be mutual. They can be mutually exclusive, you know? That's one thing that in a lot of avenues, not just art, but in a lot of things you can learn. So you know, and again, his character lent itself to help. This was actually a 1-day turnaround because his character is very simplistic, thankfully. And so it kind of was like after doing so basically at this point, on one hand, I felt good after doing Sarah, right? But on the other hand, I felt bad because I didn't do Etsuko. So I'm like, on one hand, having a quick turnaround like this felt good. I'm like, okay, now we're still definitely over the halfway point, 7 of 12. But on the other hand, even though I didn't want to get caught up in art block, I'm like, but still, I kind of went around one captain to start doing the vices. Yikes, that's not good. Real artists would have just figured it out. So, you know. But yeah, that was chapter 7, Creature. Chapter 8. Speaking of Seal, here we go. Here we go. Now, this one was fun for 2 reasons. One, Etsuko was not the only one I had art block on. When I said I had an idea what I want to do for the vices, I only had an idea what I wanted to do for some of the vices. Some of the vices I had no idea what I wanted to do, and then some I had several ideas and none of them I liked. Because again, we're supposed to be challenging ourselves and trying to do different poses and stuff like that. So eventually I settled on an idea for Seal, where as a Ronin, they'd be holding their sword, okay? And I've also Seal once asked like what it would look like if I did and like draw their character in my style like a long time ago. Well, spoiler alert, Seal, if you happen to be listening or watching this video, I've done it. I finally done it. And it's okay. I think the sword is actually too short. And what was supposed to happen is the sword was supposed to be a bit more resting on the shoulder. And I think the hat might actually be too small. It's not supposed to be massively big. Like when we do cartoonish drawings of Seal's character, but I think it's actually supposed to be a little bit bigger than this. But for the most part, I'm gonna be honest, when we chapter 8 here, you know, Dreamable Seal chapter, if you will, I do like how there's a lot of these characters I've never properly drawn before, and because of that, references or lack thereof, that part I am a little bit proud of myself for getting something on paper and even coloring it and stuff like that. So the sword probably should be longer. Probably should have been rested more on the shoulder. I did give him like a black blade, kind of like, you know, speaking of One Piece, right? You know, the references continue on. But so that was this kind of idea, the Ronin idea. And then the jacket, actually, there was a lot of this and mapping this to make it look correct. It took me a while. Same with the zipper part here. And then the fact that the jacket kind of runs down almost to their knees, which is what this is, right? But there's a lot of coolness that actually goes into their design. I used the reference sheet, I believe, drawn by Andy, who's also Mechanyx, to help with this, as well as a lot of these also was Steam's cards. I didn't want to steal Steam's designs, which is why some of these characters look a little bit different than Steam's cards, because Steam has his own universe called Binary Reigns and stuff. And while I do think the way he draws people's characters, especially in that universe, including mine's, is sick, the reason whenever I draw characters, I don't usually draw it 1-to-1 with the stuff he does is because that's like his thing, right? So I'm not about to cop that. That's his, you know what I mean? I might draw it sometimes. So like if I ever feel like I want to draw the Binary Reigns version of this character, you know, I might do that in the future, of course. But that's why, as we go through some of these, even though I did use his card that he's done for some of these people as references, I also didn't want to make sure to just draw 1-1 if I could help it, because that just, maybe it wouldn't have been stealing. It's a reference after all, but maybe, you know, there was that. So the challenge for this one was the hand. This hand kind of looks a little bit, it's okay. It's okay. It's not the worst. As someone who can't draw hands and feet, it's not the worst. but it's only okay. I like this hand much better. Even though the sword and all this I feel like should be more on the shoulder, I like this hand better. And then of course you got the hair. The hair, which is a couple different hairstyles, it feels like in one. The horns, which go up through the hat. The eyes, which was, again, a constant experiment. So for this one, I kind of did the pupil. I did a light color around the pupil for this one. And then I did like 3 colors. So it was like a mid color, a light color, and then like a dark color for the top part of the eyes for this one. And I think I only did that for seals, I want to say. So there's that. But I do... My overall love in this journey is that I can sit down and say, I've done it once. Now we can work on doing it again and again and again. Because the way I started this video, or this chapter 1, remember, was talking about Steam's character felt one of the easiest to do because I've already drawn Shell several times. As a matter of fact, one second. All right, here's the Juno drawing, for example, that I referenced. It could have been better, but you know. But with Shell, right? There was a drawing I did back in January because we were playing Shadow Generation still because I was trying to 100% stuff. And the idea came out. I don't remember how the conversation worked, but it was like there's that one part where Shadow gets the Doom Wings at Radical Highway. And I was like, okay, what about that but Steam's character instead? So like I've had a lot of instances where I've drawn Steam's character. So there's a lot of familiarity with figuring out how to do that already. Whereas here, I've not drawn Seal's character before, but now that I've finally done not only a drawing, but like a full drawing, I can in the future go, okay, the hair kind of has a lot of this going on this side, kind of has like the braided cornrow situation going on this side. If we do a sword again, sword needs to be bigger, hat probably needs to be bigger. The jacket is actually kind of fun. It's almost like a trench coat, not quite, but there's like the circuitry almost looking design. It's a bit complex if you've never done it before, perhaps, but it kind of feels nice when you get something that looks nice, and that's part of the fun of the challenge. And I believe we said Seal was chapter 8, right? Cool, because this next one of the vices. So I had an idea of what I wanted to do for chapter 9, I believe we're on, which is exhibits, right? Free my ninja bits, by the way, just on a side note. So there's a couple. So on this one, it was interesting because I had the pose that I wanted. So the character's name, by the way, if I recall, and if I'm wrong, bits, I apologize. I believe the name of the character is Iris. I had an idea of what I wanted to do, right? I wanted, kind of like Senko, I wanted to give them a gun of some sort, right? So that part actually came pretty quickly. What the challenge then beyond that for this one was figuring out a lot of the rest, because technically I have kind of drawn them for the Battle Disc tournament we did like last August of 2024, like the beginning part of August when it was actually still a good month in 2024. We did a Battle Disc tournament, and so when I went to go through the thumbnail, I kind of had drawn them I'll bring it up real quick actually. I kind of drew them for the thumbnail because since it was an idea, but like Bits was also heavily involved and credited, you could say, with running it, because between him and Steam, you know, there was like a concern from Steam, not in Bits' ability, but just in the idea of like, if we put on an event, will people even come? Will they show up? You know, history and stuff like that. And Bits is like, basically, I got this. I do this all the time. And sure enough, it was covered. We actually had an event. It was cool. So I did this briefly for that thumbnail. So I kind of wanted to use this design again and this kind of make a full body of it. But also, one thing I noticed is, and a lot of times when Bits has had pictures and stuff up, it's actually been the ponytail. So I'm like, A, okay, challenge ponytail. B, make sure to have the gun in it. C, make sure to do a full body thing. So since we had fought Bits before in Battle Disc, I was able to just go back to a previous video and kind of screenshot that and look at that and go like, okay, cool, boom. The shading is okay. This left hand's terrible. This hand's not the greatest either, but thankfully the gun covers that up. I forgot about the straps that are apparently on there too until I had to go back and add them. And they kind of look small. Like, Bits isn't the tallest in VR chat specifically. They're usually not towering over people, so maybe it's like a bit okay. But I feel like I kind of made them a bit too small despite having the wireframe. But the one thing that I did love about doing this one, first of all, on the mask, it's if you've ever seen them in Twitch chat, I kind of botched a little bit because I can't draw that the greatest. but I kind of went and drew. Well, this is parentheses. I should say that first. The into ones are parentheses, but the middle part is like their name, what usually pops up in chat. I went and drew that. I was like, that'd be kind of cool though. But the eyes. So the eyes on a lot of the images, because they're a great photographer, look really, really sick on a lot of the models, right? So that was like the third, or I guess like D, are we on? A, B, C, D. I wanted to do the eyes. If I can't make anything else look great, let's make the eyes look as good as I could. So I did something new for the eyes, where I like the base, I guess, was just completely black, and I want to do this like flowery-esque design with the different colors, and then still have some of the lighter highlight shading under it as it kind of goes around, almost like like right as you're jumping into hyperspace in Star Wars, almost that kind of effect. Not when you're in hyperspace, but like right when you're jumping and the stars kind of start smearing. I wanted to do that with the colors, and I kind of actually do like how they came out. It's not the greatest, but I do appreciate that I decided to take the attempt. Instead of being a coward, I took the shot, if you will. And that's what a lot of this challenge is. Because it has to, because it turns out ponytails. So, turns out, I have a weakness to ponytails. Historically, you would think that would actually be easier to draw, right? Because especially if it's from the front view, you know, kind of like a kind of like a lump, if you will, situation going on. And then you got the going down the side or the back or something. It should be pretty straightforward, and for some reason I just don't like how it looks. Maybe it's too long, maybe, you know, that could be the issue, but maybe there's just not enough shading, because I tried to with the hair, and the reason it's shaded so differently here is because it's almost like 2 or 3 toned, and I still haven't really figured out how to perfectly shade that. Obviously I could probably have just like made it a new layer and then used I could have probably made it a new layer and then used like the layer, not the layer fill tool, there's a tool, the fill adjustment, where you like make a gradient layer and then you kind of like half shade it in. I could have probably did something like, I do it with thumbnails all the time, but I probably could have did it with the hair, and that might have looked better. But I kind of wanted to use as little tools as possible, right? Like I kind of wanted to make sure I was practicing drawing a lot of these. Not anything against tools. Obviously, the tools are there. Use them. I'm not knocking that. I'm not saying that's like wrong or cheating or anything like that. If it's there to use, feel free to use it. I'm not going to knock you. You know, if you want to use opacity to lower the blend on something, for example, go for it. One of the things I did on some of the skins, on the highlights for some of them, is when I do the really bright one that almost looked white, I do that, and then I would lower the opacity by like 50%. You know, by all means, you know. But that was what chapter 9 exhibits. So then we get into the final 3 chapters here. And this is where it gets interesting, because for all 3 of the next 3 chapters, art block hit, but for different reasons. Spoiler alert, one of the chapters is Etsuko, so we're almost there, right? Is this chapter 9 or would this be chapter 10? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, yeah, so chapter 10, pudding. Pudding's really cool. If I just take all these layers away, we got the wireframe again. So pudding, the art block I had for pudding was actually trying to figure out a pose. And this is what I mean. By this point, like this circle is usually ankle, and then there's usually like another one for like where the foot's going to be. I couldn't figure out what noise my mouth just made. Sorry about that. But I also couldn't figure out the pose for a while. So that's what actually held me up on pudding, is figuring out what did I want to do with her. A, and then B, also, this is what I meant. So there's some influence from like Steam when he did the card, right? So I kept the Mechanyx logo here, but then put a P and the D on the side for, you know, pudding dudding. I kept the goggles because I actually kind of really like that idea, even though her character doesn't technically have that on there. But then once I figured out a pose, it did become a bit more easier to do. And then again, I could practice the arms. So the arms on the hips again, kind of like Sarah, but this time with the wrists turned. So then I had to practice how that would look. If we zoom in, you know, that's a different way to do it, and I wanted to practice that. I'm like, okay, then we'll use Pudding's drawing to do that. The head's kind of okay. I feel like the face is too small. I can't tell what it is. I think maybe not necessarily the whole face, but I think the eyes are too small. I think the eyes probably actually should have been bigger, looking at it. Maybe it's fine, but I'm not quite sure. But this was the main challenge, was figuring out what to do with her arms. And then honestly figuring out the bottom half, because I didn't actually have any references. So I had to go back. Fortunately, we just did a Mechanyx world hop that was like space themed, and Pudding happened to make it. So there was actually a lot of being able to look at like, oh, what actually happened? Because like with Steam's card, it only goes to about like here. And then he did something different for the arms too, which I think is kind of cool. So I could have did that and then assumed the legs were like that. But then it was like, oh no, we actually world hopped with them. I still have the footage. I can just go back in the footage and look. And so she has like this whole kind of like thing going on down here. You have like the overall thing, right? And then you have the legging stuff that comes out. And the leggings are just like the armings, which I guess they're probably not called armings, even if these are called leggings. And then they have shoes. Kind of look like that. And it was pretty cool. It was fun figuring out how to do with the stars, the colorings and stuff here too was also pretty nice. And at this point, I'm like, okay, this is one of the 3 major hurdles I was facing after Sarah. Was Pudding, spoiler alert, Etsuko, and then the final last but least. Last but maybe not least, but we'll get to that in a second. But once I was able to actually finish Pudding, I was like, wait a second. No, we can do this. We can totally do this. There's things that can be improved on, like the laces on the shoes and stuff like that. And that's a constant, like I said, I'm going to probably think about the whole time. The shading on the skin, I wanted to apply to this, and I kind of like it. I think this should probably be pushed up more towards here than more in the center like this was. But it's okay. And again, the main challenge was the arms, especially the hands. I do like how this turned out. So challenge accomplished. But as we then move into chapter 11, it's either me or Etsuko at this point. And at this point, I'm like, here's the problem with Etsuko, and then here's the problem with me. Why I had art block. Because the 3 left, so Pudding, Etsuko, me, were art block for 3 different reasons. And maybe it's not even fair to call it art block when I explain it. But with Pudding, it was like, okay, figuring out the pose was the art block. And then once that was finished, I could do the drawing. With me, I can't seem to replicate how good my half characters look when I draw my half characters and I use them in like an intro of a video or something. I can't replicate the head for that. I can replicate maybe the rest, but the head, and I think it's just because I make the fire half too thick when I usually draw it. But back then when I used to draw it, I made it nice and thin. So maybe that's what the issue is there. I just got to work on making it thinner. With Etsuko, it's okay, so chapter 11 is going to be me. Spoiler alert, we're going to actually do me as chapter 11, even though in order I actually came last. Because once I figured out a pose, I was kind of okay with it. But this is what I mean, since I just referenced that, is this is probably thicker than it probably should have been. Because I kept it the same. So I used like I think it was like 20 or something like that when I was doing it. So I would use 20 when I was drawing this. So I used 20 for this. And it probably should have actually been smaller. It should have been like 10 or something. Because I usually like to add like a nice glow effect. Why is it like that? Go. No. Go. In any case, I usually like to add a nice glow effect for the fire part. So chapter 11, Gamrison technically, but everyone says Gam, and you know what? That's fine. The branding change was so that I have my own original name that was uniquely mine. So Gam it is. It appears. The mission objective was complete. The plan still worked off without a hitch, like a lot of mines actually do, but no one knows yet, but they will. But anyways, this was rough. I liked parts of it. I still like parts of it, but I think that's really what it is. This should be thinner. But one of the reasons I kind of liked mine and why we kind of cut in line here is because one of the things that usually takes the most time, okay, is my hoodie. So a lot of people draw it differently when they do their own takes on my character. And it always looks great no matter who does what with their take, because they always make it look cool. But for reference, my character is me. It's me with fire powers. And everything I have on is something I actually have and wear with regularity. But this hoodie, and why we're going to start with zooming out first, because my character has fire powers, like I said. I went through several wireframes. If we just jump up to the Gamrison folder here, right? If I start knocking these out, especially because like some of the fire for the stuff had to be its own layers, the dots for the hoodie and stuff with its own layers. This is one of the more layer intensive. I usually don't have a lot of layers. Not knocking a lot of layers, but I usually don't. But this was like the frame, and I was like, okay, because on one hand, the reason why I kind of quote unquote settled is because, again, I cut in line. So actually, at this point, everyone was done but me, and I didn't want me to hold up the challenge since at this point, I entered July and we were running out of time. So I'm like, okay, let's just get something down, and I can always just draw me again later if I really felt so much. So I kind of like how some parts came out. Like I like how the kicks looked out with the fire coming out of them. You know, those are my actual shoes. I actually own them. They're like Nike Dual Force 3s, some from a couple years ago. Pants, they're just like Nike sweatpants that have these like two thin red lines going down the side, on the opposite sides of the pocket. You know, pretty simplistic. The hoodie is where a lot of the detail is, because the hoodie is I call it black camo. It's called urban camo. It's an Echo Rawthentic urban camo hoodie. But urban camo, when you usually look up urban camo, is like, you know, black, white, and gray. This is like black, super dark gray, and then gray. There's no light gray, there's no whites. So I mentioned that so we can zoom in now. So there's like the black undercolor. Technically, this is supposed to be the dark color. So this might be actually the secondary color I used. And then there's these gray spots, kind of like a cow design, even if you want to go that route. And then you dot all of these, which I manually dotted these. Of course I did, because I didn't find that tedious. I was able to go through an entire podcast episode before I actually did all the dots on all of these. But you know, it took quite a while per arm, per the whole thing. But it just looks so nice at the end of it that's why I always do it whenever I draw my character. And then the mask, when I worked at the YMCA, we would have these competitions at one point in the summer where all the Ys would compete with each other. We'd take one branch's location, we compete there. So the particular year that I got this mask was we went to the Morgan branch and did a competition on the field. And we all got, well, it was actually a bandana. I chose to wear it like a mask, like Kakashi or something, but most people wore it on their head or on their arm or something like that. And I still have mine, so I still used it into the 2010s when I would start being online. And when I would be online, I didn't want to show my face yet, but I still wanted to be on camera. So I just came with the whole wearing the mask thing. Like I said, like Kakashi or something, right? Or like just a ninja period. And it worked. It worked for a while. And then eventually now we show our face and it's whatever, but I'll still use it on occasion. And for the character, I'll use it same way. Character sometimes doesn't have it. Sometimes I do have it. And then this is something that I'm never, ever good at explaining. So I'm going to explain now. So I guess I have to explain. This is part of why we jumped in line here, because my character has some exposition that I kind of just got to get out the way. I'm sorry. But the way it works is my character's face is a regular face. Like this half also looks like this half sometimes. It's just that one of the things I did in relation to, I mentioned I was going to talk about cursive, and it's partly because there was a conversation about it a bit ago in Etsuko's stream, which you might be hearing noises in the background still. Well, one at a time though, but it's actually the same teacher that I'm going to mention. We'll get to that in a next chapter probably. But the way the story that I wrote for that year works is what I did is externally there was influences, so like, you know, Kakashi again and stuff like that. Later on, Monokuma and stuff. I wanted something to do with the left eye because my character, like myself, is right-handed, so I kind of wanted to offset that by having the left side get something cool. So they got the eye, but this is like a power-up. This is like a visual cue. Like this, the face being like this on this side is because it like darkens. So it's kind of like shading. If the whole face, you just crank that like brightness setting all the way down. That's his actual eye. He uses. The mouth doesn't actually move though, so that's why sometimes I confuse people. Is the mouth? It's his mouth, but it doesn't actually move. It's like Monokuma or something like that, where it's there, but when it's like this, it's more like a grill, or actually like a crescent, because like a lot of his thematics are inspired by things, even if it's a massive reach that's inspired by fire, specifically like a phoenix or like the sun. So, you know, it gets its light from the sun, the moon. So crescent like the moon, because it gets its light from the sun. There you go. That was a loophole I went for that one. This one's kind of like winged shaped, or like a phoenix, you know, like maybe a phoenix head from the side. Wow, this is like the sun. So that's the idea with that, and it you know, it has its uses. And then that's like my actual hat, for example. If you've seen me when I do Let's Plays and stuff, that's the hat I usually wear. The hoodie I usually wear in the wintertime. When it gets down to like 17 Fahrenheit, this hoodie's more than enough. I really won the lotto with this hoodie, by the way. This hoodie is like really all I need until we get down to like, we'd have to get like to 0 degrees Fahrenheit before I'm like, okay, this hoodie might not be enough anymore. That's not to brag either, because obviously the cold does different things to different people and you need different climates. I'm not about to attack you for that. Why would I do that? You might live in a house or a world or a country where homes are built more open and stuff so that they don't trap heat because you live in a hot environment. So then why would I bash you when suddenly it gets cold? And because your home, again, isn't meant to trap heat, or maybe actually just gets great air circulation, whatever, you don't like the cold. What purpose would that serve, really? What purpose would it serve to make fun of my friends in Texas when a blizzard hits them and go, why? Why can't you deal with a little snowstorm? Because they don't got the infrastructure. Me? That's why. It makes no sense to bash them for that. It's weird. That's all I'm saying. It's like, that's kind of how it works. But yeah, so it's just a side note. This whole outfit's just my real drip, and I love it. But I could have done better on it, and I think we'll finally move on to the final chapter, which will be chapter Etsuko. So chapter 12, at long last, we get to Etsuko. Now, Etsuko, and part of why I moved her to last is because this was, in her art block, was just a lack of references. Contrary to popular belief, I don't care what anyone says about all the, what is the word she'll use? I say crazy things. Most people say I say sus things. Yeah, whatever the case is, when it came to doing Etsuko this time, the problem I had was the angle that I usually see her at is like neck up. Like when maybe like the unit finder in the bottom corner of her stream or something like that. Because she only gets in the VR, and this isn't to be rude, by the way, but like, ironically, I say that because then this is why part of I mentioned having the stream open. She's in VR chat right now, you know, but it's a bit too late for that. But I was going to say, so in terms of like her character, I could have drawn the happy circle, and I was so tempted to. I was like, nah, let's not draw the character. Let's just draw the happy circle version. Because I have drawn that like a couple times, but I've never drawn anything else but that, actually, when it comes to her. I've never even drawn neck up from when it comes to her. So I was like, nah, we can't cheat now. But the art block, quote unquote, for her was this. I'm like, okay, so I saw her obviously when we did the Day of the Disc, if you will, the non-bullying that did not happen. Thank goodness. I'm so happy Goose was like, it sounds like they didn't. I'm like, yes. I'm biased, of course. But anyways, all that aside, it was like, okay, so there was that, right? But I was kind of busy dodging discs. She threw like 1,000 at one point. Like, it was crazy. She got attacked by a shark at one point. You think I was concerned about looking her up and down? No, it was like, there's a shark there. So, you know, there was a couple problems there. When in terms of like, I don't have photographic, well, my memory is okay. But in terms of, since all these require detail, there was detail I was lacking, right? Okay, and then there was like New Year's. Okay, there was New Year's briefly. But even then, that was kind of brief. And so I brought that up to say, like, it wasn't to be rude, but they're in VR chat once in a blue moon. And even the times where they are in VR chat, maybe a bit more often than not, I'm not usually there. We don't usually cross paths at all. So it's not like I had a lot to work off of, kind of, and we'll get to that. But obviously, one of the things is, well, then why not just ask people for references? Why did you do all this, like, cloak and dagger, secrecy ninja stuff? That was part of the challenge, because it would be very easy to ask for help. And a lot of these people might have been willing to even give help of some sort, her included. But that would have kind of taken away from what I was trying to do. And again, I'm not saying references are cheating, but I am saying part of this challenge was me challenging myself to just do, if that makes sense, right? It's kind of like when people are like figuring out if they want to stream or not, right? At some point, you just have to just start. There's a lot of planning that can go into things, and I'm not knocking planning. I love planning. If you know me, I'm the long con man. Oh, Steam is live? I'm going to leave that in the video, because y'all should go watch Steam streams anyways, but we'll be over there in a second, I suppose. But to kind of, we're not going to cut Etsuko short, because that would just play into the bullying allegations. She'll get a full chapter as everyone else did, but what I was basically kind of saying, though, was, like streaming, actually, that was perfect timing, Steam. I don't know if he can hear me. He's not in my wall. I know who is in my walls, but it's not supposed to be him. At some point, you just got to start. You can plan and you can plan, and that's great. I was gonna say I'm known as a long con man for a reason. People that have known me for a while, like sometimes I'll plan something and it'll take a while before you see the payoff. That's just, it is like that sometimes. But sometimes with some of these, you do have to just start. You sometimes have to kind of get walking before you can run. You have to get running before you can sprint. It's like when we're babies. We had to crawl before we walked, most likely, unless you have an interesting story that maybe you are just built different. And you know what? That is okay. So I kind of wanted that to be part of the overarching challenge, is I wanted to just do. I wanted to make myself just do. Just figure out what we could and then just do that. And again, like a aforementioned lesson 2 is focus on making the thing exist. Then you can focus on making it perfect afterwards. Okay? So let's throw all that out the window, because how do you do that if you don't know what someone kind of really looks like? Obviously I did the goggles thing again, so I kind of like that from Steam. Obviously the ears, I mean, they're not perfect, but even like the Happy Circle version, they're pretty much the same. The hair was interesting because I kind of technically drawn. I'll just bring up the reference. Hold on. It's kind of rough. I can't find it, but in the beginning of episode Etsuko, right, I did draw them kind of low key, very undetailed and stuff for the whole Mount Rushmore gauntlet thing that Steam's putting me through when it comes to Battle Disc. So I mean, that was technically the first time I drew the hair, but I hadn't really looked at, because okay, the stream did have, like I said, the unit finder, so I did have the head I could work with, and it was really the first time I kind of looked properly at what was going on there. And there's a lot going on there, and it's kind of cool actually. It's cool because then there's layers, right? This by itself would have not been enough, considering there's the ears here and then there's the rest of the hair back here, but it kind of lends itself to itself by design as you get to it. The problem then was, and what might be a bit more funny, is so with Etsuko and the rest of them, right? I'm gonna keep it real. I've not really looked, when it comes to most people, actually, I kind of we make eye contact and that's really about it. So even Steam, I have to make this point, as I said, he was the easiest of the people to do. I never really looked at his drip that much before now. And then I realized in one of the videos when he first got the model that he has now, I did a turnaround because I was looking at how cool the drip was. So I went back to that video and was able to use that for references. So for a lot of people, I actually really don't know a lot about how they work, and I kind of vaguely remember bits and pieces. So with this one, it was kind of no exception. I don't really know what Etsuko's body looks like. But, much like right now, they were streaming VR chat. It was the night that Steam invited them to the workshop. And I got caught up in just watching them go through the vents, stealth style and stuff like that. But then at one point, they went to a Paper Mario world, and I was like, oh yeah, I kind of need that, because I was in the middle of trying to get Etsuko done. I'm like, I kind of need that. So I went click print screen. I didn't even full screen the stream like I should have. And so I have this little crunchy, pixelated almost version for the rest of her that we're going to get into. And the reason that's important is because I need you to understand why this blue jacket is here. Is because I kind of remembered, I think there's swords that she has on the side of her. And it gets rough when it comes to the bottom half of her. I'm just going to say that too. But I kind of remember bits and pieces of the outfit based off of that. I remember the arm guards. I bet there's a proper name for this that I'm botching. But there's things that I would remember when I put that together with the past encounters combined with this little crunchy picture that I now have. So the jacket comes in, as with early at the beginning. I did remember they have this pilot outfit, as I call it, where they usually have the helmet and stuff. And there was one stream where they were working on the model in Unity or Blender, and they're making a tactical shovel that they were adding to it, which I think they used at one point to dig a trench. So I'm since I can't fully remember the arms, I know there's sleeves, hanging sleeves, but I couldn't, between the crunchy picture and then just not having any other references, I couldn't remember that. I'm we'll do the blue jacket from the other one instead, and we'll just combine the outfits. We'll keep the gauntlet on the arms in part, because I can still remember that part. And then what I wanted to do, it's funny she brought this up recently, because they were, how do I put this in her words? Listening to the radio, and we were listening to episode Double Goose, as a matter of fact. and they were talking about kind of this pose. So it's funny they brought that up because this is the pose I kind of used, where again, in reference to the challenge, I had their arm kind of like resting on the swords. It's from this angle, so the swords are kind of going almost back. So that's why they kind of look maybe a bit thin. But I had their arm resting on that, and that was the idea for the quote-unquote challenge. The challenge was really just figuring out how to draw Etsuko. Her legs, for example, are an adventure in themselves because I know that she's wearing stuff, obviously now because they're doing a stream, but I couldn't quite remember. I just know there's something that's supposed to be there before the boots. So I remember the boots, and I remember this. I guess, what are these? I guess these are thigh highs? I'm not really helping the allegations, I guess, with that one. But I guess they're there, right? And they probably have more detail. But I couldn't quite remember all of it. Turns out my memory is not the greatest referencing point for drawing any of these, mind you. But what I did like was the combination idea. I kind of like how it turned out once I combined the ideas. And then I can obviously go back later and then make it, again, a constant reminder. Sometimes you got to make something exist first and then make it perfect later. Focus on making the idea. It's a story, it's a game, it's a art piece, whatever you're doing. Make it exist first. And then you can iterate on it. You can perfect it later. And then again, you can revisit it in 6 months. Like 6 months from now, maybe I will have a better grasp on how the hanging sleeves work. Because 6 months from now will be January. So there's a chance we'll cross paths on New Year's. Maybe not, because that might traumatize them. So maybe I'll just have to avoid. Okay, never mind. All right, cool. But, you know, even if I want to keep this design, maybe I want to keep that. I want to keep their regular base outfit under that pilot jacket. It'll still look cooler than this, right? So we'll see how that goes as things go on with all of these. And then even more people. Like this particular project was just the captains and the vices. But now I'll expand and I'll eventually draw everyone's characters. Probably do like a full body thing. It'll probably take time though, because this did take me a month. And I got like nothing else really done that I needed to get done across June. So I do need to take some time to catch some stuff up. So it might be a while. Also, Blau literally commissioned me. So the next person that's getting drawn in terms of like this, not this specifically, of course, but like this is Blau. Just spoiler alert. They've been very patient as I use this project to experiment again with shading and stuff that I'm not going to apply to their character when I finish drawing theirs. But in terms of finishing doing Etsuko, it was definitely the hardest of the art blocks, even though her character isn't the hardest of the characters to draw, because I'm just like, we're kind of winging it. We're kind of winging it, and it kind of works. It kind of doesn't. Like the leg, like they're thicker than they should be. I'm not saying she's bone skinny yet. What I'm saying is like it's not even like thick in a good way. If this is the knee, even though these boots are pretty high up, I feel like, you know what I mean? Like I can pick apart all 12 of these drawings if I really want to. I don't want to because I want to be a little bit proud of the fact that I did, again, take the shot. There's the me that, like I said, I joked. I just drew the happy circle version and then called that good, which would have been good. And, you know, there's notes you can make as you go on. I have a notepad. I don't have it up right now, but there's a couple of notes where it was like, you know, first of all, it was at one point like figure out Pudding. You know, Notepad's great, by the way. I love Notepad. But anyway, like figure out Pudding's pose, remember Bits' straps, revisit Etsuko's mouth at one point. Because that's another thing. I don't like how the mouth came out. I don't like how I do mouths, period. I like that, like, Bits' characters, like Iris had a mask, for example. I like that Steam doesn't necessarily have a mouth. I like that I do a mask myself. I don't like how I do mouths and noses. The eyes here are okay. I did the same reflective thing, but I did something different where I made it a separate layer so I could lower the opacity, but also blur it. So by blurring it, I used the pen tool, but I turned the hardness like all the way down instead of leaving it up. It's okay. It's okay. I probably would do it again, tweak a couple things about it. But one thing I did like that I started doing for a lot of people is they'd have eyebrows, but I also do this part right here. I did that for a lot of people, and I kind of just like how that turned out. So on the flip side, you know, so basically like from the eyes up, love it. From the nose down, hate it. But I'm talking about my ability though, because some people they can do like a single line, and it just works when it comes to a nose. It's cool, and I want to be able to aspire to do that one day. Mouth wise, same thing. I kind of just tend to do a line, and it's okay, but it's not great. But that'll come in time, right? That'll come in time. That's one of the things is like when you're going through a journey, especially if you're an artist watching this, like you do art regularly, you probably remember when you first started doing, say, like eyes or noses or mouths versus how you do them now. You probably feel differently about how you do them. Maybe you still even hate how you do them, but you do like them more than when you started. And that's, part of the journey sometimes. But yeah, so that's why Etsuko's took quite some time though, because I think the hair goes all the way down there. Yes, it does. Okay, yeah. So, there's that. This was this was actually kind of cool, this middle part. There's like this part that goes around that's like on top of this red part that kind of like hugs the middle part before it deviates down to this. So there's like cool things about each of these I could go over too. I'm not going to, but not for this one anyways. We could always do a second video if people really just want to hear me for some reason talk about art more. We could do that. But for this one, it's already pretty long, and I'm going to leave it long. But that was the idea here. I also remember there being like headphones on the like around the neck of the pilot one. But since we were doing this, I was going to leave this instead. Oh yeah, there they are. There they are, right there. Yeah, so the boots do come up quite a bit. Okay, yeah, I could just use this as a reference. I mean, the project's already done, but in the future, I mean. Also, now they're far away, so never mind. But yeah, that's part of why I had their stream open, because I knew I'd get to this part eventually. But yeah, I guess I did mention I'd talk about like cursive and stuff like that. So the reason I was going to talk about cursive is because in that same story that I had to write all that time ago is when we were learning cursive. Now in the States, cursive, I guess it's been reintroduced as of like 2024. But there was like a good 15 years where cursive really wasn't, it wasn't removed, it was replaced because we're in the digital age. So a lot of the ideology was to help or start teaching people how to, do computer skill stuff, because a lot of people started wanting emails, and a lot of teachers wanted papers to be typed instead of submitted by hand on paper, which you learn the hard way when I go and write a paper in cursive, because like personally I love cursive, but I do understand why the change happened. And then one of them was I went to turn in the paper and the teacher's like, I can't read this. You need to type this instead. And I'm like, man, that's a skill issue. Not on them, on me. My cursive, it leaves a lot to be desired. So I understand why that became the standard, though, is because teachers don't really have time to be like, oh, this one looks good, this one's chicken scratch. Well, I need to grade these all, by Monday. So if they're all just typed, I get it. And again, digital age. There's a lot of things we just do digitally now. We type a lot on computers and systems and stuff. So I get it. But cursive still looks cool. I still like the way it looks. I might not be good at it, but like watching people who are good at cursive be good at cursive, that's fun. I never opened up this layer and kind of went and did this, huh? Oh yeah, so one thing, I did the wireframe. One thing I did different though with this one is I prototyped. So when I kind of had an idea of maybe where the sleeves could be hanging. And then I kind of just didn't go with it because I didn't like how it looks like a whale fin. Like they're part whale. They're part rabbit, but they're not part whale. So that would have not been good. So, that part was changed as well. I do like, as I put on the layers, how that works, but that was my thing about and so I bring up cursive though because much like drawing and stuff too, things you do like with a pencil, because obviously I got this tablet and stuff at the beginning of 2024, which has kind of really started this digital arc of the art journey. But before it was pen and pencil, and so there's a lot of pen and pencil. I have a notebook, you can't see it, but it has drawings in it and sketches and stuff like that too. And cursive, it was funny because one of the reasons that I like cursive is because how it flows when you flow between letters, right? And so with art, that's one of the things I kind of like too, digital or on hand, is when I'm drawing something and it just kind of feels like it flows together. Cursive, I mean, I guess you can make the argument cursive in itself is an art form, right? I'm not saying you have to agree with me on that. I'm not even saying that's correct, but I'm saying like, in a way, since the learning cursive happened the same year that then I was told, oh yeah, we're switching to type and stuff because of situations like this, like your chicken scratch, garbage, hand front. Oh, you did front and back. That's nice and all, but like go home and type it. Also, now you're a day late. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm kidding. That it didn't go down like that verbatim. The teacher I had at the time was actually incredibly kind. actually about it, but that was basically the lesson that was being learned. And when you're 12, you remember it a little differently, I suppose. But at the same time, yeah. So it's like a long story short. Like I get it. I get why maybe. Like when I think, as much as I like cursive, I don't use it for anything anymore. A lot of transactions are digital, even when getting paid. So like checks, there's no longer signing checks. There's a lot of things. Like I get it, but I like it though. I understand times have changed, but I like it. So the idea that it came back in 2024 doesn't bother me. I just don't. I'm not as heated though. I guess I suppose as other people that it went away, because I understood why. Even if I like cursive, but I then hope in turn that those actually no. The point of this is actually I just take it. Let me take it back. This if you're this far in the video, we're trying to rage bait for that sweet engagement. So you know what? If you hated that cursive went away, too bad. Skill issue, cry about it. Yeah, I can't even rage bait correctly because I'm just not that angry. And I'm also not serious. So anyone that's listening that knows me knows that's not a serious voice. I can't take that seriously. You're right. Also, I was very transparent that it's just baiting engagement. It's just baiting comments at this point. But no, on a thing though in relation to art, it was cool because I would say that year with cursive and it's still being a thing, but then slowly kind of not being a thing, but me liking the whole kind of just drawing the letters and stuff, it was a turning point in my art journey. Because obviously I drawn as a kid and it was okay, same as most kids when they draw, unless you're like drawing all the time every day, you kind of they're kind of there. But that was also a moment where I then started drawing more again, right? The story I wrote, long story short, of course, it was one chapter at the time. It was Captain Jack Sparrow, Mace Windu from Star Wars, right? And then Espio the Chameleon, like, from Sonic Heroes and stuff. In a massive space battle over Mobius, so Sonic's world, but it was the Grand Army of the Republic duking it out with the Confederacy for some reason. In my 12-year-old mind, it made sense because the whole point was it wasn't supposed to make sense. It was supposed to be chaotic. I'm leaving out some details which might be begging more questions, so maybe that's for another time. But long story short, that was the gist of the story. And so because we were still writing pencil paper at the time, when I wrote the story, I also drew a Confederate warship on one part. I drew a Republic Venator cruiser on another part. It was fun. I just liked the idea of it. So then you had this paper that was in cursive front and back, and then you had these little ship drawings here, some fighters over here. It was a fun connection. And then I kind of continued that because then when we jumped even into the next year, so even just jumping into junior high, it was at that point it was oh no, type everything. And I was oh, okay, and that's what I mean. I understand. It was fun writing. It was fun writing in cursive. I'm fast at typing now, so I probably could type a paper faster than I could write it up in cursive. But I don't know. Anyways, we'll get a little bit too sidetracked. But the point that was kind of important was, so that transition started happening for us by the time I was in junior high. And so what I would do is all right, bet I will draw or not draw. I will type these papers. But when you want a cover sheet and stuff, I'm going to draw on top of it depending on what the topic it is that we're doing. So I forget why, but at one point I was able to get away with writing an entire multi-page essay on Naruto and his ninja way, his nindo, right? So that thing was full of drawings of Kakashi, Naruto, Zabuza at the time, because Naruto was just making its run on Toonami. So we were just at that early beginning to tuning exams to Akatsuki showing up. It's when Itachi and Kasame first show up, that era. So that's what I was drawing and that's what I was doing. And I think I got at least a B+ on that. I got a B+ on that paper, and then there was another thing that happened where I got to basically talk about the Space Colony arc for the entire thing, and I had to change it up for copyright so I wouldn't get exposed as just copy pasting. So I called it the Space Colony Moon, which if you look at the arc from the back, it has craters. It's supposed to be like that on purpose, especially in later games. It's supposed to be moon-like. So I just called it the Space Colony Moon. Got an A on that paper, A for arc though. I'm just saying I did things differently, and then I would draw. Drawing became a thing. I joined the anime club, and we had a wall where people could just put up their drawings that they would do. So I'd draw stuff, I'd color stuff, and it was fun to kind of keep that around. And then, like I said, in the 2010s, I felt I peaked, though, on what I could draw and then how I could color it. I feel my coloring needs to be improved. I've talked about this before, but it's like I briefly touched on it, but the analogy was I would stick to certain shading designs because I'm like, well, the foundation's bad right now, but maybe the building, if you will, the shading is actually fine. And if I can just improve the foundation enough, maybe the shading will look great too. And it just kept coming up to a point, like maybe if I took Etsuko here and I stripped this all down and I redid it with the previous shading that I did, right? Maybe it would look fine. Maybe it actually would look cool, or maybe it would just look like if Etsuko was in Sonic Adventure 2, like on the poster. So there's a world where I could have done that, and maybe it would have looked pretty cool, or at least looked decent in a different way. But I also, in this challenge, as we conclude, wanted just to challenge myself to do something a little different. So that's one of the things I really wanted to make sure I do. And in editing, I'm going to hate myself because I feel like since I don't know a lot of art terminology, I'll just use whatever pops into my head terminology. And I feel like sometimes it probably doesn't help. It probably is very confusing for people that do art and like, oh, you probably mean this. I hope, because what do you mean there when you say this? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That's all I can say. You know. Okay, so side note, I found it. The Mount Rushmore thing. I don't even think I had my tablet at this. I didn't. I couldn't have had the tablet yet. So I was drawing a lot of the earlier drawings I've done. I did with mouse and keyboard, if you will. So basically mouse. So there's a lot of earlier drawings where it was like this. So this was in reference to episode Etsuko, like I was talking about, where there's people Steam. There should be 5 spots on here because it's all 5 of them, as a matter of fact. And now this one could be Goose because we've now fought Goose. So it still leaves Rad and the Fairy, as a matter of fact. Steam's just adamantly campaigning. We'll see how that goes. But anyways, this was like an earlier instance where I remember drawing the hair, and it's okay. I always remember the neck thing because again, the unit finder did a lot of carrying. Because Steam's been rating Etsuko since at least 2020. So it's funny. There's a lot of people actually that my first. Okay, this is a bit of a side note, but when you are streaming, or even if you're a mod on a stream and you go into mod view, you can click on someone's name in chat, and it'll bring up their messages, and you can scroll back to like the first message they ever posted. I don't know for Etsuko specifically, but I know there's a lot of people nowadays where my first message, I guarantee you, is probably #mech Steam raid, or maybe just mech. And it's been like that for years and years and years that Steam's been rating people, because there was one time that Steam rated, I believe it was Roadhog's voice actor. He can correct me. And that was the raid message was mech, like heck yeah, but mech, because Steam and his drawings with like robots and mechs and stuff like that too. Obviously he does a lot more nowadays too, but he's definitely really good at that. So that was like the raid message at the time, and this was forever ago. So there's a good chance, and most people like not named Kimple and Steam's chat, my first message, if the first instance of me being there was a Steam raid, which the first instance of me being in Etsuko's chat was a Steam raid. I just don't know if that's the first message, though. It would definitely be mech, This is a bit of a side note, but just in relation to this and stuff, it's just kind of funny, because it's like, yeah. So, but I bring that up to say the unit finder has been a thing for a while. So even though this was a while ago, I think this turned out a bit better than that. This was done with mouse, this was done with pen. Yeah, so there was stuff like this in that episode too, where technically there was the full, it doesn't even have the sleeves on it, doesn't even have the thing around the middle correctly. I did this part completely wrong. I'm so glad that she went to the Paper Mario world that one night. I know the thing is crunchy, but it was like good enough. Between that and my memory, I can make this work. Because what the heck is this? Well, then to be fair, it was the style on purpose, because look at me. It was on purpose. But this was the end result, if you will. I saw this idea. I think it's the League of Villains theme on YouTube from My Hero Academia, right? It has like the different, like several villains lined up kind of like this. Is where I got the initial idea from. And then I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to do that with the 7 head captains. But the one in the actual video was this one. And the reason is because I had this cool idea on top of that. Was every one letter from each person's name would spell the word captain. So I had to cheat a little bit when it came to me and Etsuko. I cheated with myself, and then I also cheated with Etsuko. So most people had a letter in there I could use. I also kind of wanted Steam to be in the middle, so he had to be the T for captain. And even though Kimple is now Kim, we still used Kimple, so I could use the P for that, or else no one had that either. It turns out. Same with Juno, right? Most time we just say Juno, but I put the lo-fi in there so I can use the I from lo-fi. But for Etsuko, where the cheating comes in, is I cut off part of the O at the end of Etsuko so we could have a C. Because most of the letters were pulled out, and I'm like, okay, well, if I use Etsuko, if I use Miko, like there was no iteration that had a C in it straight up. So she ended up being the C because I cut off part of the O, right? All the letters are transparent, but the one letter that matters, so half of the O is transparent. So it could be the C. So Captain, Captain. That was like the secondary idea I had. I'm like, oh, I have to do that idea now. So that's why this wasn't initially in the original video where this project deployed, is because I couldn't figure out how to fit their names over the faces. I didn't really want to block the faces. I spent a lot of time doing this. I kind of wanted to have it where if it was blocking the face, it was like barely, you know. And then same with the vices. So how I cheated with me is for everyone else, they had that one letter for vice, right? So I took the middle part of the M in my name and made it the V. So VICES, vices. So the I in pudding, the C in creature, the E in exhibits instead of just bits, and then the S in seal. So that's how the final project came out. I'm proud that I did it. I'm proud that I went with it. I'm even proud of ones like this. Like this one, obviously, there's some things that could be better, but I am also happy that I did it because life marches on. Life goes on whether we want it to or not. When something happens, when something doesn't happen, it's always going. So instead of being like, oh, I wish I could draw, or I wish I could do this, or I wish I could do that, or I could just start trying it, I could just do it, I could just work on like certain things in life are skills. And sometimes some people feel like they start off with a lot of skill, and that happens, right? If you're trying to sing baritone, and so you end up, in life having a nice deep voice to begin with, you're already maybe a step ahead of somebody that has a nice high falsetto going on. But part of it is a skill regardless. You see it all the time, maybe in like anime, for example, and obviously anime is fictitious, so keep that in mind, but we have that gifted person that starts getting left behind by the person that's training super hard. Well, that's because the gifted person might be relying too much on the quote-unquote gifted aspects of themselves, when truth be told, and maybe I'm just different, maybe y'all will think I'm weird for this too, but if I was in a situation where I was gifted, I would still train, because if I'm already gifted, then how much even more could I do if I train on top of that? You know what I mean? Even if it's just maintaining the status quo, right? So it just keeps me, in tip-top shape with said gift, quote-unquote gift, because that's one thing that you learn when you deal with artists for long enough. A lot of them hate being called gifted with talent, because a lot of them put in work to get to where they are. What you're seeing, someone might even think this is impressive. You know what? Thank you, because you're a liar. But you know what? I love you. Take a hug. Just pretend, just. But the point I'm making, though, on a bit more of a serious note, is a lot of them, they put in work to get to where they are. So what you're seeing as gifted, and I get why sometimes that's brought up, right? I think a lot of people, even artists, get why. Some people have been drawing as long maybe as they have. Some people have been drawing 20 years and they just have never gotten over a hump. So they're calling artists gifted because they feel like they've ascended to a place that they've been trying to get to as well and just never broke through. I get it. But a lot of people, they did things to get there. They worked hard. They practiced skills. They leveled up. They broke through that barrier, if you will. Even they're what you're seeing is a product of hard work, years and years of hard work. Steam will go live and he'll just doodle something super quick. These took me a day at a time per person. So at minimum out of these 30 days, it was going to be at least 12 days. And it took me longer than that for some people, because some people I didn't have references, or I couldn't figure out a pose or whatever, And so you would look at that and be like, man, Steam got that God-given talent. And reality is Steam's been drawing so long that he can just do things super quick and well and efficient to his standard. And one day, maybe this will be a faster process. I mean, that's one thing that I noted in one of the more recent videos, is when you, even drawing something once, you kind of start learning some habits and some patterns. That's one of the things about Inktober that was talked about a lot. Speaking of Steam and Etsuko and people, like sometimes it's just about establishing habits, good habits and stuff. And sometimes those habits can apply to the subject that you're drawing, right? Like, I might never draw this combo again because I might actually learn the sleeves proper. But regardless, that's still probably most likely the same hairstyle. So having drawn this now once, there's a couple things out of this that I can take away going forward that I could with Steam at the beginning too. Like, I've drawn shells so much, I know how to draw the eyes on the helmet and how big to draw them now. Because sometimes I draw them way too small or too far apart, or they look like googly eyes. And it's like, it takes time. These things take time. And that's why I wanted to make this super long video as a catalog of things that take time. That's just how it is sometimes. So whether you're doing a cat, or you're doing a scenery, or you're doing a background, or you're doing the 7 captains and vice captains, or you're doing a drawing based off of very little information, references are not cheating. Take your time. Understand you don't have to do it in 30 days. You don't have to do it in 100 days. You can take 1,000 days. I'm gonna steal this real quick, as a matter of fact. 1,000 days of training to develop, 10,000 days of training to polish. Yeah, I didn't plan this at all, but I totally have their stream open because I just had plans to reference all kinds of things on it, by the way. Speaking of, there they go. They're doing animation stuff. That's sick. I'm gonna end this video so I can sit in their stream, and then Steam was gonna stream. I'm gonna pose you several questions, and then you don't have to answer all of them. You can just choose the one you would like to answer in the comments below, or I guess, to yourself, if you're just listening to this video while you're on a walk or something, whatever, maybe just something to think about to yourself a bit, is why did you start drawing and doing art and stuff? Like, was it for you? Did you just like the process? Was it for something else and you grew to like it? Or was it you grew to like it and now it's for like work? Or, maybe it evolved, that reasoning, over time. A. B, what would you say is like your favorite type of thing to draw? It doesn't have to be like a specific person. It could be like, maybe you like drawing robots, or maybe you like drawing cars, or maybe you like drawing scenery, or maybe you like just drawing something based off of your mood. So there's not even a specific category. It's just how you feel on the day, kind of a thing. That's the second question. Third question, if you don't mind, is what would you say is your strongest thing when it comes to drawing? So for me, for example, I guess I could have been given examples for all of these, right? So for question 1, which was just kind of what got you into drawing, why do you like drawing, etc. I just kind of like the idea of seeing something in my head and then seeing if I can make it a reality for other people. The plans of my mind are such grand design, and it'd be really cool if I could eventually get the skills to kind of, put that out and then show other people, oh, I thought of this really cool character, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, boom, I can maybe also draw it. And then that looks pretty cool, Maybe, that's a reason, I guess, for me, is one of those, is I like that. Even this, and the reason why I left this layer up, because I wanted to talk about the idea of sometimes you'll have a situation where you might try to cover something, where you're like, I don't know how to draw this, so we're going to cover it. We're going to not draw legs because I can't draw legs. We're not going to draw hands. We're going to put them in pockets. This was an example of, I could have just been like, well, maybe, she has her hands behind her back for some reason because I can't figure out the sleeves. I was like, no, let's just that jacket idea, let's just combine. That's not an actual outfit, I don't think. I gotta cross-reference it, but especially with the goggles. But it was like, cool, let's just try stuff. And then, there we go. What was the second question? I think the second question I said was like your favorite subject to draw, I believe. Was that question 2 or 3? I forgot already. So let's just restart. Question 2 is, oh no, question 2, yeah, it was like, what is your favorite type of thing to draw? And for me, I don't really have a favorite thing to draw necessarily, but I will say is I am having a lot of fun drawing other people's characters just to kind of see if I can. It's like a nice measuring point where someone's character will come along and they'll have a lot going on, maybe, or maybe a little going on, but it's something I've never really drawn before. So it's kind of a nice excuse to try and draw said thing. Like, one great example of this was when I played Sonic Forces forever ago at this point on the channel. I mentioned that I had a Sonic OC growing up. I love Sonic and stuff like that. So I made a Phoenix OC. I could never really describe him well, but then when I could draw, like, at least even a little bit, this is also more of that Sonic Adventure 2 shading that I'm talking about, where, like on the wings here, even on the hands, we have the color, you have this dark color, and then you have this thin line of color on top of it. That's like when you look at the Sonic Adventure 2 poster, how it kind of works out. But yeah, it was like, that's such a cool idea to me, where it's like you can have this idea, and then maybe eventually you can make it exist, and then it's really cool. This like the like Archie comics have a certain kind of shading that I wanted to try too. So I kind of, this is what it looks like in that kind of look, if you will. I don't know if they'll mind this, but if you've been in my streams and you've seen someone by the name of Edge Tenebris swing through, homie for a long time now, one of the first quote unquote commissions, if you will, that I ever got was they had an idea for an OC, a Sonic OC, as a matter of fact. And so I'm like, I'll take a shot at it. Why not? You know, like kind of what I still do to this day, where I'm like, I'll just take a shot at it at least. You know, maybe you get some ideas off of it, and it'll evolve from there. So one of the first things I did was try to draw their OC based off of the specifications that they talked about. So this is what I mean by peak, though. I feel like I peaked back then, though. Something about Sonic characters and more anthropomorphic people, the proportions are different enough. Like that hand would be massive if I was drawing a regular person, but that hand's just fine for a Sonic character. And now to this day, this design, you know, he was able to use this to go get, you know, better. It wasn't like a smite or like a jab at me, by the way, when I say this from him. It's me. They were able to, from here, eventually get a lot more cool commissions and stuff from other artists, and like kind of refine the design, and now it looks really cool. If you ever see them in chat, click on them and you'll see their profile picture. And it's a coolly evolved design now from back this, where I'll just be like, yo, I'll take a crack at drawing your character. Why not? What's the worst that can happen? I'll get some practice. It's cool. But it does mean there's a bit of a swap from doing like Sonic-esque characters to human characters. That's for sure. And where we get to here. Obviously, technically, I was the last one to be drawn, but I've technically drawn myself before. So this was the last on the road of all of that. So, yeah. Now we're going to wrap this up. So that was question 2. So question 3, I believe I was going into, what would you say is like your strong suit, though, when it comes to doing art? So for me, I would say the initial drawing itself, right? I'm not necessarily in love with how I color stuff, but I do think once I maybe get something down, where is it then? Like the initial drawing, pre-color and stuff, once I get that down, that's when I maybe start kind of loving a bit more of what it is that I'm doing. And then maybe the coloring, maybe it helps it, but sometimes I'm like, the coloring's okay. Coloring's okay. You know, so for me, if I had to say what I would say is my strongest suit at the moment, it's actually just the drawing in itself. That's why I want to work on shading so much, because I think there's some things that I draw like okay, or at least even decent, but I'll lose it in the coloring. And so if I can improve my coloring, you know, boom. I'm not going to ask you to say what you think your weakest one is. If you want to, go for it. I'm not going to judge you, but I feel like asking what the strength is like a bit more of a positive, so people might be up for that a bit more. But you can explain yours. Like mine's, like I kind of just mentioned, is shading. I think if I'm going to ruin a picture, it's going to be in the shading. I think if we just pop through all these real quick, I don't think the shading is necessarily the worst part of all of these, but I do think some of these benefited more in the draw than in the coloring. Some of them even kind of look okay, to be fair. Some of them, I'm just kind of glad we got anything done, you know. But there we go. Yeah, I do appreciate if you not only watched / listened to this, but hopefully was able to maybe take something away from this positively. I hope. That's usually when I do this kind of videos. Like, it is to document myself and my art journey, for example. But hopefully I said something that was maybe kind of nice, or maybe insightful, or maybe helpful, or rage baiting, because I'm baiting that engagement. Let's go. Cursive sucks, actually. That's the thing. It's not even really that great. People hype it up. I'm just kidding. I'm joking. But, you know, yeah, I can't say that, because if when I do draw stuff, I literally sign it in cursive, usually somewhere, or I'll at least make the G cursive and then extend the line all the way through, and then sign the rest of the name on top of that line. Even if it's in what is it, print? What do you even call it? Because I love cursive, but I usually write in like standard because my cursive is so garbage. So, when I did Inktober, as a matter of fact, right? That's one way we'll end the video is we'll just go over Inktober. So I lost track of the chapter. This is chapter Inktober, right? So day one, I forgot to write what the day was. I think the day one was backpack for October 2024. So that's why I wrote a lot in, not print. Print can't be the right term. But basically standard, right? Because I like cursive, but that's already hard to read as is. So it'd be even harder to read in cursive. And obviously what I could have done at the age of 12 is when I learned my cursive is chicken scratch garbage, I could have just tried to perfect it over the time. And I've perfected how to write my name specifically because there are occasions where you do have to use, signs up like licenses. When I have to get any of my licenses or certifications redone, it's usually you got to write that and sign that in cursive. So there's that. But, chapter 1 was backpack, and this is why I want to end the video with Inktober stuff. I know I was wrapping up like we're gonna wrap up in the next 60 seconds. Sorry, we might be going the distance. I'll try not to make this part long though. But Inktober, I originally was not gonna do Inktober, and then I constantly kept seeing like Steam and Etsuko kind of just talk about why people do Inktober or what the goals of Inktober could be. It's not necessarily that if you can draw a backpack. It's about habits, establishing good habits even, and stuff like that. And then like who's really judging me if I can draw a backpack or not? And if they're judging me, does it really matter if we're doing this for us? You know what I mean? If I'm drawing this for me, for an excuse to do art, for an excuse to practice things that I maybe don't usually draw and do, then I'm not saying be above criticism. Sometimes criticism can be constructive, right? I don't necessarily count hate as, criticism, by the way. Some people put that in the same category, and I'm like, that's diabolical. I just don't hate myself enough to be like, yeah, you know what? Hatred, that's definitely feedback. No. To each their own. I mean, you do you. Maybe you're just built of bricks and stronger stuff, but I just don't got time for that. But at the same time, it's like, while I'm open to criticism, while I'm open to feedback, part of this challenge was also just an excuse to draw. And you're supposed to do these in one day. So, that's what this was kind of about. So this one was backpack, where the emphasis is I saw Steam he started connecting all of his in a great story. So I'm like, I kind of want to do that too. And if we're going off of like Etsuko talking about like it's just about kind of good habits and stuff and not really about being judged, yeah, let's try it. So this one, I'm 15 minutes away. There's a backpack full of stuff. And in the back left over there, so in the story that I wrote, the group of us that are in it, and it evolved over time. I probably could redo it actually and just add some of current people in too. But basically, we had access to what I called the battle vehicles, which was basically a spoof of Zords from like Power Rangers and stuff. So that one back there is known as BT, which is also a Titanfall reference, but also it's short for battle truck. That was the one that I usually used. And it's like a combination of an H2 as well as a 2011 like Ford Escape, because we had one of those for a while, in black of course, because that's how we do. And the thing, all the battle vehicles are basically tanks essentially. For some reason they just can tank a bunch of stuff that regular vehicles shouldn't, and they're also filled to the brim with whatever the pilot or the driver of whatever one just needs. Because like plot wise, I felt like it when I was writing the story. I'm like, listen, it's like the Gadget Mobile. It just is because it is. All right. Oh, the jet that they're flying, why does it have like 10,000 things worth of like flares and stuff? Because the plot demands that them and the jet survive the flight because they're a good pilot. And anyways, I'm getting sidetracked, which is why I'm not. But I was like, I've never properly drawn BT. So I was like, this would be a good excuse to do that even. It'll be great for a lot of reasons. Also, all the vehicles were sentient. You could kind of summon them by like whistling for them or something. Everyone had one that was like specific to them, and then there was like the bigger ones for like group like sessions and stuff. I'm getting sidetracked. No one cares. So day 2, I believe day 2 is discovery. So same thing. Bottom right, that's the front of the truck now. We find an egg, a chow egg. Scene 2, top right, it hatches. Scene 3, we now have a chow with us as we're on the ride. The 15 minutes away joke is the idea that for some reason we'll be like, oh yeah, we're 15 minutes away from an event. Us melanin variety perhaps. And we're 15 minutes away. We haven't even left our bedroom yet. Maybe we're dressed even, but we still haven't left the front door. And we're like, oh yeah, we're 15 minutes away. We're not 15 minutes away. We haven't even gotten in our car yet. That was a running joke. So day 3, I believe, was boots. And I say that because I think that's when Steam drew the boots, and it had like a creature in it. We were going to learn until day 4. So now we're finally 14 minutes away. There's a child just chilling in the trunk. We're getting these prototype shoes, which are based off of Shadow and Knuckles' shoes at the same time, which will end up being useful later. There's like the arm of my hoodie, same design, right, where we do like the spots and then we do the dots on top. That's fun. Day 4 was exotic. So I wanted to do 2 things here. So exotic, the actual exotic thing is the giant phoenix firebird flying above, but we're missing it because down here I found this exotic noodle shop called Snoodles, which they make snake noodles, but they wouldn't describe, like they wouldn't explain if it is it because the noodles are made of snake or because the noodles are snake styled noodles. They wouldn't say anything. So there's that. And that was part of the because these are the whole thing is you do these by day. You can catch these up, right? You can miss a day and then just do 2 days in one. It's not like it's super strict after all, but I wanted to try and make sure I did all of these per day. So then we got to day 5, which was binoculars, I believe. Yeah, so then the Chow tells me that there's a phoenix that I missed, so I'm looking for a phoenix. And so then I do the thing. There's a running joke where I talk about gestation periods. I don't care if it's pronounced as gestation periods. They should have used the letter J then. It's just that simple. As someone who uses the letter G rather narcissistically in a lot of things I do, it makes a G sound. I do not care. So anyways, gestation period. So there was a running joke about that. I forget why. Final Fantasy XIV is what started the bunny jokes back in 2022, by the way. But that wouldn't have been as funny relative to, since this was 2024, obviously the disc and the stuff. So I bring it up. And so I did a couple of things in this one. First, Odaman, because why not? Second, I think it was the first time I've drawn other characters but mine or like the Chow. So there was like Seal and Steam. I'm cratered because as soon as I bring up the gestation period of bunnies, we get sniped in the distance. We see in the binocular someone just jump up there and then suddenly there's a disc and suddenly I'm just dead. Or at least I'm incapacitated. So I kind of wanted to do multiple things. I wanted to do the shading on the inside of the binoculars, for example, too. I kind of wanted to ink it up like that. I kind of wanted to do... There's like maybe there's a name for that style, but I kind of wanted to... It's called Inktober, after all, so I kind of wanted to do that a bit more. But with other people's characters, I didn't need to necessarily do a bunch of detail. So with Etsuko's, obviously, Steam's, and Seal's, they were kind of darkened out. With Odaman, not so much, because he really only is just kind of like the number 0 with some horns. So they didn't need to do so much there. Finally, thank you, past me. I started putting what day was what. So day 6 was Trek. So after being unincapacitated, I ended up coming to this opening. I trek up to this top of this hill where there's a bunch of grass and trees and stuff on the right bottom there. If you played Sonic Adventure, that's a temple from the Mystic Ruins. Because if you also played Sonic Adventure, there's Angel Island way up in the sky. We can't trek up there. We've hit ocean at this point with mountains in the distance. How are we supposed to get up there? Well, we do get up there because day 7 was Passport. And Knuckles stops us. Because I'm like, you know what? I used to be kind of decent at drawing Sonic characters. I wonder if we can do the run back. So, same thing, though, where I'm kind of writing a lot of these without cursive. Because, I mean, you know, it works. This one was kind of fun, almost comic-like. Where I can't get past, but what if I have a passport? That's what a passport is for, right? For passing things? I'm stupid. But you know, it was fun to think about stuff like that, like hike. So we hiked to the Emerald Shrine. The penmanship is not great here, but you know, the drawing was the fun part of it. Day 9, the sun. So we hiked to it's sunrise now, because this journey kind of started. We broke kind of like with running. I try and beat the sun because when it gets to the summertime, you can feel how you want about the heat. Some of y'all are built for the heat. We mentioned this earlier where I'm like, I don't see the point of making fun for like people in Texas for not being able to deal with the cold when Texas isn't built for the cold. You know what I mean? It just seems weird to me, right? I don't know, right? Like up in the north areas, our homes are built to contain heat. So of course the cold doesn't really bother us quite literally because it has sometimes a hard time even in making it past the front door. So, you know, the obviously the downside is you have like especially British homes. Where I live, I'm not going to dock myself specifically, but I do live near the old town, and the old town also has a bunch of brick homes. And it turns out it's like a brick oven. Like when you're making like a brick oven pizza or something. And the pizza, as you might imagine, melts and cooks, doesn't it? It's like that, but with humans. it's a it's an experience. But anyways, what I'm saying is, on a side note, is so the idea is beat the sun, beat the heat. You'll hear runners say that. I love running. We do 5Ks. You know, it's that which is 3.3 miles. Spoiler: in the States, we use both measurements. Just on a side note, so you'll see me back and forth sometimes between measurements, especially when it comes to running and races and stuff, because we just especially with runs, actually we use kilometers. But that's not the funny haha make fun of Americans if I don't do that. So it's 3.3 miles. But anyways, we do 5Ks in this household, at least at minimum one a week, at minimum. We shoot for every day, which maybe isn't the best on my knees. When you fall and you tumble and you injure one of them, and you're like, all right, cool, we can walk that off. Some, the smart runners, they know how to take care of themselves. They know how to go, hey, maybe not today. We don't push it today. We maybe still get a run in, but maybe we do something a little different. Maybe instead of a 5K, like a 4K or a 3K. See how that knee really feels with recovery time. But anyways, that was the idea here. So all this took place. The adventure started basically much like running routine. We got up to beat the sun. So now the sun's finally rising, which worked perfectly for day 9, sun. So day 10 is a bit sentimental, unfortunately. Well, this wasn't planned. I didn't plan to add this in the video, but I guess we're adding this now. So at this point, there's a friend of ours, a friend me, Steam, and some others have known for several years. Met during the pandemic. Everyone was home. VR chat was like the thing. By the name of Digi, or we called him Digi. And one of the recent videos was talked about where Graphic, his name used to be Daddy DiGiorno, like the pizza, and Graphic got sick of calling him DiGiorno, so he shortened it to Digi, and it stuck for the rest of us too. So unfortunately, late last summer, they passed away unexpectedly, and it was very unfair, and it sucks. It still sucks. So day 10 of Inktober, which was during October, was when their birthday would have been. They would have been 29 last year. They were a couple weeks away, and at this point, that his passing was still pretty fresh. So when we got to this day, despite whatever plot I had going at the time, I knew for at least day 10, which would have been his birthday, which we probably would have been playing like, Gary's Mod, Trouble in Terrace Town, or doing something goofy. I wanted to draw him instead. One of the more recent hobbies, not really a hobby, I don't know if that's fair to say, one of the more recent things he had kind of gotten into was coding, and then motorcycles. He was getting his license so he could ride motorcycles. He was going places. Probably like the ghost hunt. There was a ghost hunt me, him, and Graphic were supposed to go to Ohio and do, and turns out I've been perpetually a bit too broke to fund my part of said trip, so we never got to do it, unfortunately. But there was a lot of places. And that motorcycle, it was going to be good. He was also already proving that he was going to be extremely safe as a motorcyclist, so that was exciting. So I wanted to include that though. So after leaving Angel Island with BT, we're en route. We're in a desert now, and we came across a wanderer, if you will, someone on just kind of seeking his own ride, if you will. And I kind of referenced the Fast and Furious scene where Vin Diesel and Paul Walker's character separate right before, when they kind of look at each other. Yeah, and that might be the best I've ever drawn Digi's character ever, which is kind of rough because I didn't even complete the hair. It looks like I don't know how I missed that, but I put all of the effort into just perfecting that. So like his character, then you have the line next to my character. It looks kind of funny because my character has such less detail next to his character. But I put like all the skill points for the day into just trying to make sure I drew his character fantastically, for that reason. And yeah, it kind of sucks still. Or it's always gonna suck. Let's be real. It's the thing about losing people. If you've ever lost, not even just one person, but just people. Period. It's never easier every time. Unfortunately, his passing wasn't the first time that I've had that happen. But it's not like, speaking of skills and stuff. It's funny because it's not like it's a skill that just gets easier though, because it's different people every time. You know, when you lose someone, it's a different person that gets lost, and he was the protagonist of our group, of seekers, I should say, specifically too. Right, like that's not throwing anyone under the bus. That was like the agreement. That's the kind of person he was, the kind of personality he was. So we really did lose our Red Ranger, but thanks to art, he could still kind of be there, in a way. We could still do things like remember him. We can draw him. We can do a bunch of really cool ideas in that regard. And so this one, for day 10, like I said, it landed on what would have been his 29th. I was like, cool, we're somehow putting him in this story, at least for this one. And then on a side note, so my eyes are really simplistic in this one, because one of the things with my character, when I started using them for YouTube, and I do stop motion sketch stuff, is I would make the eyes dots. And Steam brought that up once, that I should kind of keep that around somehow. And so when I draw my character, either kind of small or mini or simplistic, I keep those dot eyes for that reason, because I thought, yeah, Steam, that is a good idea. But yeah, yeah, there's a lot. I could have a whole another 30 minutes on just this, so we'll keep it moving, because I decided to keep them around. Spoiler alert. So we went from Angel Island to the desert to this pyramid. Now, this specific pyramid, you will recognize, at least in a second, if you've ever even heard of, or let alone played, Sonic Adventure 2. This is Eggman's pyramid base. We're just not inside yet. So one thing about this one, day 11, was snacks. So one thing about Digi is, I'm pretty sure he was a masochist. I don't think that's even insulting to say. He loved to eat the spiciest stuff on God's green earth and Beyonce's internet. And he hated milk. And now, if you have eaten spicy foods, maybe you don't need milk afterwards, and that's fine. But that's like usually the thing people will say is like the go-to drink when you eat spicy foods. You're not supposed to drink like soda and stuff. The capsaicin, if anything, will make that worse if you try and drink like something sweet, sugary. You actually want milk, stuff that will kind of coat that off, or like celery, stuff like that. Obviously, it varies based on people's tolerance and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong. But the thing about Digi is we'd be in a call. He'd be streaming like Minecraft or something. So he'd be like live on Twitch. So there's, you witness this in real time. And we maybe be on call on Discord. So we'd be there with him. He'd be like, "Ooh, cool. I'm going to eat this Scorpion California Ghost Reaper tail chip." You're gonna like lick it. You're going to take like a nibble of it. And you just hear this crunch. He put the whole chip in the mouth. I'm like, oh my goodness. And at first, nothing. And then suddenly it's like he's struggling to exist. He is suffering, and he will refuse milk. And it would be the funniest thing. So that's what this was a reference to. Was he definitely liked. He didn't just like flaming hot Cheetos or putting like a bunch of Tabasco on like a tuna fish sandwich or something like that. He loved the crazy stuff, and more power to any of y'all that love that stuff. I'm not knocking it. It's fine. But he would never want milk, and that's what this was. So yeah. So day 12, remote. So day 12, we attack the pyramid. Top left is where it starts. My thing's blocking a little bit, of course, but we attack the pyramid. There's several of us now. So there's Seal, there's Steam's character. There's a bunch of us now at this point. So we jack the shuttle that's in there. So since it was called remote, we used a remote controller for a remote launch to get to a remote location. We're heading to space. If you know Sonic Adventure 2, you know exactly where we're going, by the way, as a matter of fact. And if you don't, you're about to find out. Because day 13, Horizon. That's a Horizon. But that's also the arc. That might be the best I've ever drawn the Space Colony arc. Something about it. It's a simplistic design, right? Like a half circle, the wings, and stuff like that. But for some reason, like if you're an artist, by the way, because I've had this conversation with Steam, even though he's not necessarily like the hugest Sonic Adventure 2 fan. But if you're an artist, just side note, how would you draw the Space Colony arc? And not necessarily like the most serious drawing, but like it's like the half circle, and then the circle that kind of so it's like an oval for like the face section, depending on the angle. What you feeling for that, But just a question to pass off to artists. If you, I don't want to make this come across as a commission. Like you gotta go draw the Space Colony arc right now. That's not really fair. But I'm just kind of curious, right? Because there's a lot of circles involved in the arc's design. But one of the things I've always struggled with is actually the face. I always seem to make that oval. It's just wrong, and then so then making the dome on top always kind of doesn't look correct either, and it just kind of falls apart. But this is the one time where I drew it. I'm like I like at least 95% of how I drew it. So then day 14, Rome. So one of the running jokes is my sense of direction. For what reason or the other, sometimes I get founded, but it just takes time, as where other people might just immediately go to the right place. So most of this picture, except for the bottom right, is me at different points just roaming around different stages on the underside of the arc. So like think like Final Rush, Final Chase, stuff like the Meteor Herd, me bouncing off of springs, going through rails and stuff, while the rest of them are just down there. So like Digi, Steam, and Zabel just being like, should we tell him he went the wrong way? He really is Zorro. It's like, yeah. And then Steam, of course, just nah. Same way he let me call Quaddy Quaddy for 6 months without correction. So day 15, guidebook. So speaking of, on my roam, I ended up at Meteor Herd. I roamed all the way down there. And if you remember, not necessarily Meteor Herd, but Mad Space or Rouge's space level, the detecting hitboxes, if you've ever played that game, were the hints were reversed. So the trick was growing up is you'd get one of them, you hit the pause button, and then you'd read it backwards. It's one of the reasons I know how to read backwards pretty well. It was actually Sonic Adventure 2. It taught me. It forced me and my brother to have to learn, or we weren't finding the Master Emerald pieces. So I'm like, yeah, it would have been better to have a proper guidebook, because those things were backwards, and yeah. So that was the fun. Was in you take an idea, and then thanks to Steam having it be like a constant evolving story, then put it into a context of not only do we have a day to do this, let's see if we can fit this idea together and have some even kind of coherent plot going on. So then we got grungy. This one was funny because the arc needed repairs. My camera's kind of blocking Odeman in the top corner. He's typing away. He's Hacker Man, so he got glasses. But then you have like, you got a couple people. You got, Steam, Juno, Graphic, who can one arm an entire girder. And then you got me, of course. So the context for this one, the shirtless grungy look, has to do with the shirtless Aaronville thing that I won't get into. That's the context. There's more context to that context. I'm not going to get into it. So I just had some other people like Mioy and people in the corner to being like, ew, gross. Because I'm like, that's kind of the comedy I was going for, was like self-deprecating, but stuff like that. Day 17 was journals. So obviously we're on the arc. We got Gerald Robotnik's journal. There we go. And it was just in time because Shadow Generations was coming out. And if you get Shadow Generations, if you ordered it early, you could actually get a physical copy of Gerald's journal. But even if you didn't order it early, you could collect all like 25 pages in game, and then in the gallery you could have you just have access to Gerald's journal. We did a video where I just actually read each page. It's like a good 20+ minute video because it was actually a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. But yeah, you went page by page, try to kind of decipher the redacted stuff too. And he goes over like, and it's a pretty cool journal on a side note. Like he goes over why, for example, the Eclipse Cannon is called the Eclipse Cannon is because Eclipse can be another name for Shadow. And if you remember the game Shadow the Hedgehog, the Black Arms invade. And he built that cannon as like the only thing that could take down Black Doom's Black Comet. So it's a cannon that he made for Shadow in a battle that Shadow never asked for. And he's very apologetic in that particular post in the journal. He's kind of like, I'm so sorry, Shadow, you're going to have to fight this fight that you didn't ask for, you don't deserve. But maybe I can, do things like this. I can gift you a giant, moon-destroying cannon, essentially, that you don't use on the moon, that you're supposed to use on the comet only. Because throughout the whole journal, I won't get into it too much, but throughout the journal, he's low-key, like, Gerald's beefing with Gunn. The creation of the arc itself was Gerald's design and doing, which is why the underside looks like his face. But Gunn and like the world government, basically, so unlike One Piece, it's basically Gunn. Gunn operates globally, even though they're kind of centered in the United Federation. They kind of want inside, he's like, okay, you're a genius. You've built a space colony 50 years, ago, and it's super advanced and stuff. We want weapons, because, that's how this usually goes. We want you to research the secret to immortality so we can make immortal soldiers. And Gerald's like, nah. And he only pivots because Maria comes down with a terminal disease. And he's like, well, if I can find a way to get a cure by researching immortality, let's do it. So There's that. And so he's beefing with Gunn because Gunn wants. He's like the Ark. Basically, Gunn is like the Ark is like the perfect orbital platform. We want an orbital cannon. And so Gerald, it's in the journal. He builds the Eclipse cannon. It taps into the core of the Ark, cannon's core and stuff. But because it does that, and because the Ark is so massive and has such a powerhouse of a system powering it, you can never fire the Eclipse cannon as a precision orbital strike on Earth. It will do, and we learned this actually. It wasn't Sonic Battle, but there was some event. I think it was like Japanese only, but it's still considered, pun intended, canon. Eggman at one point remotely hacks the Ark, kind of like Justice League style, where Lex Luthor uses the Watchtower to shoot at Cadmus. And it had no Chaos Emeralds, so the Eclipse cannon was only firing at 0.5% power, and it still leveled a city, a small city. So it wasn't like in Shadow the Hedgehog where like 5 of them punched a crater into the planet, but it still leveled like a small city on 0.5% power. So he made this thing. He was like, checkmate, Gun. You got your your weapon, but you can never use it. Just for Shadow, after Gerald went into despair, and so he altered Shadow's brain a bit, his memory, if you will. And then he goes and uses it and blows up half of the moon. Yeah. I'm getting sidetracked a bit because it kind of reads like a tragedy of journal entries where it starts very happy and then it gets very depressed, and then obviously the last post is the infamous monologue from Sonic Adventure 2 where I plan to give you all a taste of my revenge. Yeah, it's great. Anyways, we got the journal. So then we take the shuttle. Now this is not how shuttles work, but you know what? Screw it. One of the fun things about doing art, you can just make your own rules. So not only did we land the shuttle back down from the Ark, we drifted it back onto the highway and we just drove the shuttle. Because we had a lot of people with us at this point adventuring, so we needed a big enough vehicle to house all of us. Until we got to a ridge. And it turns out jumping a ridge in a shuttle that you then come to a stop with is a bit difficult. But we did it. Until we got to this uncharted territory where, spoiler alert, we're heading towards Pumpkin Hill. You ready? Because we found a demon rhinoceros at Pumpkin Hill. That took us to a campfire. It actually just wanted to test us, and then it was like, okay, we good. So like filling in the ideas is part of the fun, Rust was an interesting one. We left Pumpkin Hill and then went to this fictitious city I made up that was called Spinary. It's an old forgotten machine city, long abandoned, and we don't really even know if the people abandoned it are still around just somewhere else or what happened, but the city's rusted down and it's a very old kind of design to it with all the antennas on top and stuff. But we then went on an expedition, so you got Digi on his motorcycle in the front still, BT close behind, everybody else kind of riding along in the shuttle. We went northbound and we found our target, which was this scarecrow, this demon scarecrow that I came up with a while ago, named Black Stilts. They usually wear a hat. I didn't feel like drawing a hat because I felt like you wouldn't be able to tell it's a scarecrow unless I put that little like Shikamaru pineapple looking thing on the back instead for this one. But there was our target, and it turns out Gerald. So the reason Gerald's journal is relevant is because he has a lot of notes on things in there he did a bunch of expeditions, and researching stuff when he would tour. Like he found Angel Island, he found the Master Emerald Shrine a long time ago. Hence the Ark's core looks like that. He found Emerald, which we saw in Shadow Generations Dark Beginnings in episode 1, right? So he had information on a lot of stuff is what the running plot is, including how to beat this guy. And so for Day 26 camera, there's a lot of people. There's the hat. I threw it back in. Taking pictures with all kinds of cameras, Polaroid, smartphone, tripod, all that stuff. As we battled him, we won, spoiler alert. And so on the ride home, it was pretty quiet and peaceful, actually. The mission was done. Leaving the west gate of Pumpkin Hill, I decided, what if it was like a giant pumpkin we kind of come out the mouth of? Not like a dimension, just like the entire gate, instead of being just like a regular wall, was a wall that was shaped in like a giant pumpkin. It's like a jumbo pumpkin. And of course, navigation-wise, I took a wrong turn. So at some point, we had to stop, and we had to be course-corrected because Zorro stuff. So there's Gammo, because Gammo character's an AI, so they would obviously be able to help us get back on track. In which case, we're getting... So this was kind of fun, too. So when we got to Day 30, Day 30 was violin. Day 31 is something else, but Day 30 is violin. So I had these giant mountains as we approached from the south, so we're going northbound, that these giant mountains are shaped like people playing... Well, this is towards the top, like people playing violins. Kind of like to welcome you in a way, towards that city in the distance. The city in the distance is called Chaarchy. So it's the combination of chaos and anarchy put together. It's the capital of the story that I was talking about that I never properly built. And one of its main features is the Grand Capitol building, which is basically a combination of the Seattle Space Needle and London's Big Ben clock tower, but way more massive. And so actually this was with Steam's help a little bit. Well, years ago when I first theorized this building, I was like, would it be better to have the clock under or above the saucer section? And it was kind of like the consensus was, if the building's massive enough, you'll be able to see the clock, from anywhere in the city. So put the saucer on top for that reason. Because if the saucer's under the clock, no matter how big it is, the saucer might make it hard to see the time, especially when you're closer to the building. Whereas if you're closer or far from the building, the clock faces are under it, there you go. And then the top part can still play the same role as it does in Seattle, where it's like a restaurant, observatory, all that stuff too. So it's a combination of the two buildings, but it's very, very, very unnecessarily, it's a whole city block essentially by itself. If a whole city block was just one tall building, so the city might look small from this picture, but it's not. I just put up a city wall because it was kind of cool to think of that idea. But it's actually a really massive building. Is what the actual situation is called. In the city over is called Chaarchy because there's a lot of chaos and anarchy, almost so much sort together that they almost cancel each other out like math, and sometimes it's actually pretty peaceful. So that was Inktober. We're gonna wrap this up for real this time, and I wanted to record this video. I'm in the process of backing up my computer, all the files. That Windows 11 is coming. They're ending support for Windows 10, and just in case the update nukes all my stuff, yeah, let me get it all backed up and let me record this real quick. Because if it nukes all the Photoshop stuff and I can't find my files or whatever, because even if I back them up, if it's just hard to find them, well, now at least we've done this now. This we've done. We've 100% done this. We're going to keep doing this, actually, as a matter of fact, and it's going to be really great. It's going to be really fun. It's going to feel good. So that's all for this video, for real this time. Thank you so much for watching this video. You don't have to like, comment, subscribe, but you could comment it with your own art journey if you want to, and yap about your own art stuff. I'll listen. You've lent me your ear. I'll lend you mine now. So thank you, my friends, as we get out of here. And yeah, we'll check in with another one of these videos months from now, and we'll see how much progress we have, or maybe haven't made. Maybe we've hit another plateau. But I don't know what you're going to be next. We're just going to have to wait and see. So until this time, take care and enjoy pizza responsibly. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.